Starting a renovation project? Start right. Start here at H&L Rapid True Value for all your essentials at our 10 stores island-wide. The time by H&L Rapid True Value is
nationwide time, 5 o'clock.
Crisp and refreshing. Room temperature or chilled. A pure water would drink. The temperature by Pure Water is...
It's 31 degrees Celsius in Kingston, 30 in Montego Bay.
From the Nationwide News Network, comprehensive, incisive, tough. This is Nationwide at 5.
Good afternoon, I'm Cliff Hughes.
And I'm Mahiri Stewart.
In Nationwide News at this hour, a majority of Jamaicans believe Andrew Holness is leading an extremely corrupt government.
That's according to the latest nationwide Blue Dot polls powered by Total Tools.
Government MPs demand answers from the Integrity Commission regarding its ongoing probe into the Prime Minister's statutory declarations.
The IC should be mandated to certify the Prime Minister's declaration forthwith.
Demand for 3 guarantors hampering take-up for some winners of the Dr. Barrington Wint Memorial Scholarships.
It's not so easy to find persons because outside of the period to study, there's another 5 years of bonding.
Prime Minister Holness welcomes guilty plea of 8-year-old Daniel Rose killer.
In news from the rest of the world, Guatemala to send 150 police military officers to help fight gangs in Haiti.
Tropical storm Helene set to become major hurricane.
And in headline sports, there's a new chairman of the board of directors at the Institute of Sports.
And later on our broadcast, in our cover story at 5:35, the nationwide Blue Dot poll has found that more than 50% of Jamaicans believe the Holness administration is extremely corrupt. This comes at a time when the Prime Minister is grappling with the fallout from the Integrity Commission's report into his financial affairs. An ethicist, Dr. Anna Kasafi Perkins, public affairs commentator, Dr. Michael Abrams, and a member of the JLP's Communication Task Force, Marlon Morgan, will discuss.
From 6 till 8, we'll come to you live from the Sterling Investor Briefing at the AC Hotel in St. Andrew. The briefing will feature leading financial and investment experts giving their outlook on the country's macroeconomic landscape.
All these and more as we take you home on air, on your mobile, Nationwide 90 FM, Nationwide Radio, jm.com, and on the Nationwide app available in Google Play and the App Store. This Tuesday afternoon, it's Tuesday, September 24, 2024.
News at 5 is brought to you by KFC's Big Deal. Order through carry-out, drive-through, delivery, WhatsApp, or the new KFC Jamaica mobile app. KFC Big Deal. Anything for the taste.
If it's news, it's got to be Nationwide 90 FM.
And now to the details.
The Nationwide Blue Dot polls, powered by Total Tools. Total Tools, they almost always have it.
A small majority of Jamaicans, 51%, believe Andrew Holness is leading an extremely corrupt government. That's according to the latest nationwide Blue Dot polls powered by Total Tools. The poll found that supporters of the opposition People's National Party, young people and unaffiliated voters were more likely to view the Holness administration as corrupt. Ricardo Brooks reports.
With corruption being ranked as the second most important concern for Jamaicans in these polls, it's perhaps no surprise that a majority of them believe the government is corrupt. Jamaica ranks 69 out of 180 countries on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index for 2023. The country is perceived as one of the most corrupt in the Caribbean. The Blue Dot pollsters asked 1,246 respondents to rate how corrupt they believe the government is, with 0 being not at all corrupt and 10 being extremely corrupt. 51% of Jamaicans say they feel the Holness government is extremely corrupt. Only 10% said they believe the government was not at all corrupt. The figure is partly being driven by supporters of the opposition People's National Party, the PNP, 75% of whom say they believe the Holness administration is extremely corrupt. They rated the government between 7 and 10 on the corruption scale. But the corruption perception cuts across partisan lines. 57% of unaffiliated voters also believe the government is extremely corrupt. Respondents aged 18 to 24 also took a critical view of the government's handling of the corruption issue. They also rated the government between the 7 and 10 range, indicating a perception of extreme corruption. Respondents who identified themselves as supporters of the Jamaica Labour Party JLP and older respondents aged over 65 years expressed the least concern about corruption. 36% of JLP supporters rated corruption in the government as low, ranking the issue between 1 and 3. Respondents over 65 years old also rated corruption in the government between 1 and 3. Alarmingly, 24% of Labourites thought the government was extremely corrupt, assigning a rank of between 7 and 10. The nationwide Blue Dot polls, powered by Total Tools, were conducted between September 6th and 19th. The polls have a margin of error of plus or minus 3%.
The nationwide Blue Dot polls, powered by Total Tools. Total Tools, they almost always have it.
Ricardo Brooks for Nationwide News.
The government members of the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee are intensifying their demand for more answers from the anti-corruption body regarding its ongoing investigation into Prime Minister Andrew Holness's statutory declarations. Their call comes as they unanimously rejected a motion seeking to have the anti-corruption body's report on the Prime Minister referred to the Financial Investigations Division, FID. The motion was tabled by opposition member and South East St. Andrew MP, Julian Robinson. Siobhan Campbell tells us more.
Mr. Robinson, in defense of his motion, argued that clearing the cloud of suspicion now looming over the Prime Minister is critical to preserving public trust.
And whereas it is untenable for this cloud of uncertainty to remain over the head of government, be it resolved that the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee supports the recommendation of the Integrity Commission for the matter to be referred to the Financial Investigation Division, and be it further resolved that the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee calls upon both Houses of Parliament also to support the recommendation of the Integrity Commission for the matter to be referred to the Financial Investigation Division.
In its report, which was tabled in the House of Representatives last Tuesday, the Integrity Commission revealed it could not certify the Prime Minister's statutory declarations without further investigation by the FID. However, Minister of Justice Delroy Chuck expressed outrage, calling the actions surrounding the report deeply troubling.
I am appalled that the Integrity Commission can present a report which is quite clear, is in their own indication is incomplete, and therefore is asking for further investigation by the FID and the TAG, and no, asking Parliament to support that recommendation, which is the substance of this motion. And before it submitted this report, why didn't it engage the FID and the TOJ, which within its mandate it can do? And it seemed to me the question may well be asked, why was this report submitted to Parliament at this time?
Labour and Social Security Minister Pernell Charles Jr. took it a step further. He questioned whether the Integrity Commission itself might require scrutiny for potential corruption. Minister Charles Jr. accused the Commission of attempting to extend its investigation through the FID in an inappropriate and overreaching manner.
Those bodies that it is now seeking to redetermine this matter, that it itself has concluded. It's either that the IC is turning against itself, or that you have a situation here that is exposing itself as being a matter of corruption. And I must tell you, I am very concerned, because as a nation, if we intend to address corruption, Mr. Chairman, we must ensure that those with the primary responsibility are not including any contaminated or corrupt operation in that effort. And I speak very seriously on it, boldly. This is laden with procedural irregularities.
Legal Affairs Minister Marlene Malahou Ford questioned why the Commission was seeking Parliament's endorsement for something it had already set in motion. According to her, the Prime Minister's declarations had already been referred to the FID, making the Commission's request perplexing. This stance was echoed by government member and Southwest St. Catherine MP Everald Warmington, who cast doubt on the legality of the entire move. In rejecting the motion, government members of the Oversight Committee extended an invitation to the Integrity Commissioners to face further interrogation regarding the report. That meeting is set for October 3, though to date the commissioners have yet to appear before the committee. Whether they will seize this opportunity remains to be seen. Siobhan Campbell for Nationwide News.
And in a statement following the vote, the opposition says the outcome of the vote signals a worrying shift in how oversight bodies like the Integrity Commission are being treated. It says the rejection of the motion has further stalled investigation into the Prime Minister's financial declarations. According to the opposition, this undermines the role of the Integrity Commission and raises questions about the government's commitment to transparency. It added that the government's decision to block the motion sends a troubling message to the Jamaican public, suggesting that important checks and balances are being disregarded for political reasons. The PNP says it will not relent and will use all lawful means to ensure probity and keep the government honest while upholding principles of good governance and accountability.
And Justice Minister Delroy Chuck says the Integrity Commission must be made to certify the Prime Minister's statutory declarations. He says the country deserves finality.
My view is that it is about time that this report be the final report, and the IC should be mandated to certify the Prime Minister's declaration forthwith, because it has found nothing. It has found nothing that could in any way suggest that there's any wrongdoing. This report, Mr. Chairman, has only 171 pages, plus the appendices to 179. I've only put in material that can cause nothing but speculation, but it has nothing that direct to any wrongdoing or inappropriate behavior.
Speaking at Tuesday's sitting of the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee, Minister Chuck says any further referral constitutes fishing.
And submitted this report, they need another period of time for further investigation, Mr. Chairman. No, Mr. Chairman, as far as I'm concerned, the IC is either going to be a competent body to complete its investigation, whether it takes 6 months or 2 or 3 years. But at the end of the day, when it submits a report to Parliament, it must do all the consultation and investigation that is available to it, and it has spent enormous resources to do so. I don't think this international expert came here for chicken feed, whether it is paid by the taxpayers of this country or whoever from the resources of the IC. And now you're going to say, after all of that, Mr. Chairman, we don't find any charge against the PM, but we think we could? No, Chairman, this is fishing.
Delroy Chuck, Minister of Justice.
Several students who have successfully applied for the Dr. Barry Wint Memorial Scholarship to further their medical studies are in danger of losing the help because of the demand for 3 guarantors. The students have only 6 days left to secure the guarantors. As we hear in this report from Shalois Michael, parents of 2 of the scholarship winners are pleading with the Ministry of Health that is, to adjust the requirement for 3 guarantors.
The Dr. Barrington Wint Memorial Scholarships are a significant thrust by the government to reduce the shortage of health professionals in Jamaica. The scholarships were introduced in May of this year. Recipients will be bonded to work in Jamaica's public health system for a stipulated period, depending on the sum paid for the course of study. That will also be linked to the number of guarantors required to get the scholarship. As long as the tuition is over $1 million, the agreement requires 3 guarantors. Many of the medical studies cost more than $1 million, and guarantors are hard to find, and even more so if they are required to sign a bond spanning several years. That's the hurdle facing several recipients. One parent, whose child is going into her 2nd year of study in medicine, says the requirements alone are enough to deter any prospective guarantor.
The employed person has to have a job letter And then they also have to prove that they own an asset, whether it is motor vehicle, and then that itself comes with its own condition. It can't be any vehicle over 10 years old. You can use your life insurance policy, you can use a bank statement, you can use your title for your property. But it's not so easy to find persons because outside of the period to study, there's another 5 years of bonding. So technically you're asking somebody to commit probably about 9 years. So yes, they got the scholarship, but it's like you're not even sure if you're going to be able to access the funds because of just how difficult it is to find a guarantor.
With the September 30 deadline fast approaching, the parent says she sent an email to the Ministry of Finance explaining the difficulties of getting the 3 stipulated guarantors. But she has not received any positive response.
I wrote to the Ministry of Finance and they did indicate to me that they're using the bonding policy 2009 and whatever is included there basically would be what they're abiding to.
Another parent whose child is going into her 4th year of study says the tedious task of finding guarantors might rob her of securing the scholarship. We distorted her voice to protect her child.
My son was not able to do it. He has equipment, but they're too old because they're over 10 years. My brothers are too old. They're over 65. So it has been a challenge trying to find somebody. You're giving me a scholarship and at the same time you're taking it back from me because my hands are tied. I can't move forward. And the deadline is Monday for us to take in all these documentation. And it is just hard.
We reached out to Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton, who's overseas. He gave us a contact number for someone who told us that she's in a meeting. She was not available before news time, but we'll call her back as we follow the story. Shaloy Smichael for Nationwide News.
You're listening to Nationwide News at 5. More news after these.
Value Drug Pharmacy offers curbside pickup and delivery of your branded and generic drugs. WhatsApp your prescription to 876-881-6695. The time by Value Drug Pharmacy is
16 minutes after 5.
Rent-A-Kill Initial is the expert in pest control, air purification and hygiene services. Call today 876-926-4236.
The temperature by Rent-A-Kill is...
It's 30 degrees Celsius in Kingston, 31 in Montego Bay.
The future of manufacturing is now. Join the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association, JMEA, in association with VM Group for an unforgettable evening on September 28, 2024 at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel. They're celebrating the industry's brightest minds and the groundbreaking achievements shaping Jamaica's future. Request your tickets at bit.ly/2024 awards tickets or email awards@jmea.org to learn more. Let's witness the future. September 28, 6:30 p.m., the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel.
You good, Mark? No, from where they may have these terrible heartburns. I don't know why. What kind of food you eating? To tell you the truth, I mostly eat fast food. I live alone and I'm too busy for cook my youth. That's your problem. You're eating too much processed food and building up trans fat. Trans fat? What that? Trans fat is a type of fat in a processed foods like fried chicken, fries, donuts, and them things there. So how that cause heartburn? So eating trans fat can cause acid reflux. So if you don't stop eat it or cut back on the amount you eat, things can get worse. Like what? You can get heart attacks, stroke, type 2 diabetes, or even die. But fats and oils not important for eat, my youth. Yes, but the healthy kind in a vegetable aisle, nuts and fish. Okay, I'm gonna switch up my diet starting today. Just remember to balance it out with your fresh fruits, vegetables, and ground provision.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Freedom, speed, agility, intelligence, friendship. These are the hallmarks that define the dolphin, the master of the seas, and are the hallmarks that inspire Sterling Asset Management. For over 20 years, we have provided investment products that give our clients financial freedom, and our service is fast, insightful, warm, and genuine. Sterling Asset Management, intelligent investing for the intelligent investor.
Continuing the news, the woman charged with the abduction and murder of 8-year-old Danielle Rowe, Coyote Satchel, has pleaded guilty. This was confirmed by one of Satchel's attorneys, Donovan Collins. 8-year-old Danielle Rowe was abducted from Brayton Primary School in Portmore, St. Catherine on June 8 last year. She was found later that day on Roosevelt Avenue in St. Andrew. Her throat was slashed. The child died at the Bustamante Hospital 2 days later. At that time, the police said Satchel was involved in an intimate relationship with Danielle's father. Satchel, a 30-year-old dental assistant of Padmore District, Red Hills in St. Andrew, was taken into custody on Friday, August 11, 2023. She was picked out at an identification parade on Friday, August 25, 2023. Mr. Collins says Satchel's attorneys will attempt to make a plea in mitigation before her sentencing.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Holness is welcoming the news that the investigation into the murder of 8-year-old Danielle Rowe has led to a guilty plea.
After the tragic killing of Danielle, I had directed the then Commissioner of Police to take all the necessary investigative steps to bring the perpetrator to justice. Today, I want to commend the police for conducting a thorough investigation and compiling evidence which led to the perpetrator being taken into custody and pleading guilty.
The Prime Minister says, as a society, Jamaica cannot tolerate vicious attacks such as the crime that led to Danielle's demise.
World in a Minute is brought to you by ABC Electrical Sales. We make things as easy as ABC. Hose Assembly and Supply, equipping Jamaica for success.
And Charles O'Connor Consulting Network, COCN, driven by international accounting standards, modern technology and integrity.
The World in a Minute.
Guatemala is to send 150 military police officers to Haiti to help the Kenyan-led force on the ground fight violent gangs. Guatemalan President Bernardo Arellano made the announcement at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday. His announcement comes as a UN-backed mission led by Kenyan police officers in Haiti struggles with a lack of personnel and funding. This reportedly prompted the US to propose replacing it with a UN peacekeeping mission. President Arellano did not say when the military police would deploy. Currently, there are nearly 400 Kenyan police officers in Haiti, along with nearly 24 soldiers and police officers from Jamaica and 2 senior military officers from Belize who arrived earlier this month. The current mission is expected to have a total of 2,500 personnel, with the Bahamas, Bangladesh, Barbados, Benin, and Chad also pledging to send police and soldiers, but it's not clear when that would happen.
And finally, forecasters say Tropical Storm Helene, which formed today in the Caribbean Sea, is set to become a major hurricane. The storm is now moving north toward the U.S. Heavy rains and big waves are already lashing the Cayman Islands. Some Florida residents have begun to evacuate or fill sandbags ahead of anticipated flooding. Hurricane watches were issued for parts of Cuba, Mexico, and a stretch of the Florida coastline, including Tampa Bay. A tropical storm warning was also issued for parts of the Florida Keys.
World in a Minute was brought to you by ABC Electrical Sales. We make things as easy as ABC. Hose Assembly and Supply, equipping Jamaica for success.
And Charles O'Connor Consulting Network, COCN, driven by international accounting standards, modern technology and integrity.
Recapping the top stories in nationwide news at this hour, a majority of Jamaicans, 51%, believe Andrew Holness is leading an extremely corrupt government.
That's according to the latest nationwide Blue Dot polls powered by Total Tools.
Government MPs demand answers from the Integrity Commission regarding its ongoing probe into the Prime Minister's statutory declarations.
The IC should be mandated to certify the Prime Minister's declaration forthwith.
Demand for 3 guarantors hampering take-up for some winners of the Dr. Barry Wint Memorial Scholarship.
I'm Cliff Hughes.
And I'm Mahiri Stewart.
You can find the news on our website at nationwideradiojm.com and on the Nationwide app available on Google Play and the App Store. News next, 6 tomorrow morning.
News at 5 was brought to you by KFC's Big Deal. Order through carry-out, drive-through, delivery, WhatsApp, or the new KFC Jamaica mobile app. KFC Big Deal. Anything for the taste.
Yes, Kemlani Mart is making deals.
Really? Deals like what?
On scratch, dented, new furniture and appliances.
Oh, that's great.
And that's not all. Kemlani Mart has tiles, toilets, doors at crazy low prices.
So I can make a deal on a sofa set?
Of course, and dining room sets, outdoor furniture, ACs and more. No reasonable offer will be refused.
Only at Kemlani Mart, Manor Center and 77 King Street.
I love this place, you see.
When I grow up, I'm going to be a famous gamer with viral videos all over the internet. I'm going to be rich. Good thing I'll already know how to take care of my money since Mommy got me this Sure Start account.
Open a CIBC Caribbean Sure Start account for your kids and give them a head start on financial smarts with a $1,200 sign-up bonus from us. We believe in their dreams as much as you do, so let's get them going together. Start young, start strong with Sure Start from CIBC.
Drive Hyundai. Hyundai vehicles beyond your dreams with an exclusive 4.99% interest rate. Yes! Shop Hyundai vehicles and get a super low 4.99% interest rate on your car loan. Plus 2 years free service, 1 year insurance, and 5 years warranty. Offer valid on all 2024 Hyundai vehicles. Drive your Hyundai with the lowest interest, 4.99%. Conditions apply.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Sports here on Nationwide 90 FM. I'm Wayne Walker. Former champions Cornwall College were holding a commanding 5-1 lead over Green Pond in the latest from the Issa Water the Costa Cup schoolboy football competition. In other updates, Ocha Race, they lead Fern Court by 10 goals to 1. Fogo Road, they lead Vertec 4-0. Kemsale trail Garva Maceo 3-1. Mannings leads Grange Hill by 4 goals to 0. Lennon High School, they lead Denby High 3-1. And Spot Valley leads William Nib by 1 goal to 0. In the Issa Digicel Manning Cup, St. Jago High School, they're holding a 6-0 lead over the team from Edith Dalton James, while Woolmers, they beat Tivoli Gardens by 4 goals to 2. So the Tivoli Woolmers game is a result. Woolmers winning that one by 4 goals to 2, but St. Jago, they're leading Edith Dalton James by 6 goals to 0. Matthias Nunes scored his first Manchester City goal to help edge Pep Guardiola's side into the EFL Cup third round with a 2-1 victory over Championship side Watford today, on the night when 16-year-old Caden Brathwaite became the third youngest player to start a game for City and the youngest under Guardiola. Nunes followed up Jeremy Doku's 5th-minute opener with a precise first-half finish. In other results today, Chelsea blanked Barrow by 5 goals to 0. Aston Villa, they defeated Wickham 2-1, and Leicester City beat Walsall 3-0 on penalties after playing out a 0-0 draw in regular time. The St. Kitts and Nevis, the St. Lucia Kings actually, they beat the Trinbago Knight Riders by 80 runs in front of a full Brian Lara Stadium in Tarouba today. It's Republic Day in Trinidad and Tobago today, a holiday, so the game started very early. Now, the Kings posted a challenging 218 for 6 in their 20 overs, thanks in the main to a superb century opening stand of 145 in 12 overs from Johnson Charles, 89, and Faf Duplessis, 59. Tim Seifert weighed in with 30 against skipper Kyron Pollard, 4 for 38. The Knight Riders were blown away for 138 in 17 overs, with only Jason Roy, 41, and Chris Jordan, 27, leading the way against Noor Ahmed, 3 for 39. Both teams are already into the playoffs. The Kings, though, will travel on Saturday for their final group game against champions, the Guyana Amazon Warriors, at Providence. First Vice President of the J3As, Ian Forbes, has been appointed Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Institute of Sports in Sports. Forbes, who was acting chairman on the last board, is one of 8 members from that board who have been retained to serve a new 2-year term effective September 8. The others are Ronald Anderson, Dr. Michelle Holt, Alan Beckford, Glenn Nelson, Emil Spence, Shirley McLean Brown, and Suzette Ison. 4 new members were appointed: Deputy Chairman Howard Chambers, Julian Patrick, Floret Blackwood, and George Legister, who is an ex-officio member. Meanwhile, Minister of Sports Olivia Grange has also announced that Blackwood, Leslie Harrow, and Newton Amos have been added to the board of directors of the Sports Development Foundation as of September 9, 2024, until the board expires in April of 2026. The SDF board is chaired by Leslie Campbell. And that will do it for sports. Sports is not going to be at 6:05 as it usually is. It's going to be in the morning news at 6.
Since 2016, 156,000 more Jamaicans are working. This is more than any other time in our history. Your government is caring for you.
The time brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister is
5:30.
You want to play all your favorite Supreme Ventures games like Cashpot and Lotto in a one place? Plus bet on sports with Just Bet and horse racing with MBet? Come take a step in at the new SV Games app. All of the games you love in a one place. Step in and play all your numbers. Bet on all your sports and get enough chances to win in the only gaming app you need. SV Games from Supreme Ventures. Visit supremegames.com to download the SV Games app. More ways to bet, more ways to win at your fingertips. Must be 18 years or older to play.
Motorists, as Minister of Justice, I appeal to you, obey the road code, pay your ticket on time, and only go to court if the ticket is being contested. Close to 80% of matters coming to the parish courts are for traffic breaches. Let's work together to make our roads safe and ease the burden on our courts.
Outperform, outlast, with top performance, Jackama, reliable, full stop, not comma. We have the expertise for drilling and demolition. We have the power tools for plumbers and electrician. Fancy select tools, free parts and free repairs. 3 parts, free repairs. 2 to 3 years. Hilton, available at Delta Supply, 106 Hagley Park Road. Call us at 876-302-61124. Delta Supply, we service what we sell.
You good, Mark? No. From where they may have these terrible heartburns. I don't know why. What kind of food you eating? To tell you the truth, I mostly eat fast food. I live alone and I'm too busy for cook my youth. That's your problem. You're eating too much processed food and building up trans fat. Trans fat? What that? Trans fat is a type of fat in a processed foods like fried chicken, fries, donuts, and them things there. So how that cause heartburn? So eating trans fat can cause acid reflux. So if you don't stop eat it or cut back on the amount you eat, things can get worse. Like what? You can get heart attacks, stroke, type 2 diabetes, or even die. But fats and oils not important for eat, my youth. Yes, but the healthy kind in a vegetable aisle, nuts and fish. Okay, I'm gonna switch up my diet starting today. Just remember to balance it out with your fresh fruits, vegetables, and ground provision.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
You want to play all your favorite Supreme Ventures games like Cashpot and Lotto in a one place? Plus bet on sports with Just Bet and horse racing with MBet? Come take a step in at the new SV Games app. All of the games you love in a one place. Step in and play all your numbers. Bet on all your sports and get enough chances to win in the only gaming app you need. SV Games from Supreme Ventures. Visit supremegames.com to download the SV Games app. More ways to bet, more ways to win at your fingertips. Must be 18 years or older to play.
The highly anticipated event for investors is back. That's right. The Sterling Investor Briefing is set for September 24, 2024 at the AC Hotel in Kingston. Tune in to Nationwide at 5 on Nationwide 90 FM from 6 to 8 p.m. as we help them to highlight the company's performance, market update, and macroeconomic topics. The conference will feature a lineup of prominent panelists such as Charles Ross, Henry Mooney, and Keith Collister. You don't want to miss this one. So tune in to Nationwide at 5 on September 24 from 6 to 8 p.m. The Sterling Investor Briefing is back. Tune in for all the updates and highlights. Only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by Sterling Asset Management.
Hi there. Here's some good news for these trying times. Quote, "By God's word, I can see where I'm going. They throw a beam of light on my dark path." Unquote. Psalm 119, verse 105. Listen for God's Word weekdays at 5:45 a.m. and 12:55 p.m. through
Oasis. Stop by for a refreshing drink and share a God perspective for the day.
Oasis. Weekdays 5:45 a.m. and 12:55 p.m. right here on Nationwide, a revolution in media.
The rebroadcast of the Oasis can be heard weekdays at 5:45 a.m.
Cover Story is brought to you by Hyundai. Modern, premium, affordable vehicles.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here nationwide at 5. I'm Cliff Hughes.
Good afternoon, listeners. I'm Ricardo Brooks. Good afternoon, Sir Cliff.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brooks. You're on the road. Where are you?
I'm coming to you live from the AC Hotel in St. Andrew. We're here for the Sterling Investor Briefing. We expect to hear about the company's performance and have an outlook on the country's macroeconomic situation. All of that is coming up at 6. We'll take you through the presentations and the question and answer section, and also the different presentations from the speakers they have lined up.
Very well. So we will be hearing more from that at 6 this evening. But inside the cover story, Ricardo, listeners, a small majority of Jamaicans, 51%, believe Andrew Holness is leading an extremely corrupt government. That's according to the latest nationwide Blue Dot polls powered by Total Tools. The poll found that supporters of the opposition PNP, young people and unaffiliated voters were more likely to view the Holness administration as corrupt. Ricardo Brooks has the details.
With corruption being ranked as the second most important concern for Jamaicans in these polls, it's perhaps no surprise that a majority of them believe the government is corrupt. Jamaica ranks 69 out of 180 countries on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index for 2023. The country is perceived as one of the most corrupt in the Caribbean. The Blue Dot pollsters asked 1,246 respondents to rate how corrupt they believe the government is, with 0 being not at all corrupt and 10 being extremely corrupt. 51% of Jamaicans say they feel the Holness government is extremely corrupt. Only 10% said they believe the government was not at all corrupt. The figure is partly being driven by supporters of the opposition People's National Party, the PNP, 75% of whom say they believe the Holness administration is extremely corrupt. They rated the government between 7 and 10 on the corruption scale. But the corruption perception cuts across partisan lines. 57% of unaffiliated voters also believe the government is extremely corrupt. Respondents aged 18 to 24 also took a critical view of the government's handling of the corruption issue. They also rated the government between the 7 and 10 range, indicating a perception of extreme corruption. Respondents who identified themselves as supporters of the Jamaica Labour Party JLP and older respondents aged over 65 years expressed the least concern about corruption. 36% of JLP supporters rated corruption in the government as low, ranking the issue between 1 and 3. Respondents over 65 years old also rated corruption in the government between 1 and 3. Alarmingly, 24% of Labourites thought the government was extremely corrupt, assigning a rank of between 7 and 10. The nationwide Blue Dot polls, powered by Total Tools, were conducted between September 6th and 19th. The polls have a margin of error of plus or minus 3%.
The nationwide Blue Dot polls, Powered by Total Tools. Total Tools. They almost always have it.
Ricardo Brooks for Nationwide News.
Thank you, Ricardo. And for perspectives on this poll finding, we are being joined by ethicist Dr. Anna Kasafi Perkins, public affairs commentator and obstetrician gynecologist Dr. Michael Abrams, and a member of the Jamaica Labour Party's Communication Task Force, Marlon Morgan. Good afternoon, lady and gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome. Let me begin with you, Marlon Morgan, from the JLP's Communication Task Force. This must be a devastating poll finding. 1 in 5, 1 in 4 Labourites think their government is highly corrupt. That must be devastating.
Well, Cliff, thank you for the opportunity. You know, corruption as a phenomenon and as a scourge on any political system of governance, particularly our democratic system of governance, is quite concerning. So as a political party, the Jamaica Labour Party finds these poll results concerning, but at the same time not demoralizing. And I'll tell you why. We're not a tone-deaf movement. Neither are we out of touch with the reality and the perception that pervades the society. It is true that there are a number of persons who view the scourge of corruption as a blot against the administration, and we're mindful of that. However, what we would want to call and draw people's attention to is not the fact that corruption doesn't emerge in the life of an administration from time to time, but in this case, and what we have seen since 2016, are decisive, purposeful and unequivocal actions on the part of the government to treat this corruption and to, of course, strengthen institutions that combat corruption and to treat with good governance. I speak, for example, of the fact that it was the JLP administration, this very administration, back in 2017, that established the Integrity Commission. We have been resourcing it each year, increasing its budget year over year, as it has requested, and supporting its work. When we had instances in the past of governance challenges, I speak, for example, of the fallout as it relates to Petrojam back in the day. What we did was the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service undertook some consultations to develop a database of persons who are prospective board members so that we can enhance and strengthen governance at public bodies. I also speak, Cliff and, Ricardo, to capacity development, capacity building workshops as it relates to corporate governance that the government has focused on and provided for members of the political executive, cabinet ministers and others in particular. So corruption has emerged and has reared its ugly head at different points in time, less so in the second term relative to the first term. But what I want to draw the public's attention to is are the tangible and decisive actions that the government has taken at every turn to treat with corruption, and that cannot be contradicted, because we have had ministers who have been relieved of their ministerial duty when credible and serious allegations of corruption or malfeasance in public office has been waged against them.
Dr. Perkins?
Dr. Abrams.
Okay, go ahead, Ricardo. Go ahead.
Dr. Abrams, I hear Marlon Morgan, and he's not wrong in terms of the steps the administration has taken to treat with the issue of corruption. But clearly, the Jamaican people are saying by these numbers, it's not enough.
I agree. It's rather sad. And it's one thing we have a perception of corruption, but, the receipts are there. If you look at what has been happening in this administration, repeatedly with people having to step down, people being relieved of their posts, from Andrew Wheatley and his stuff with Petrojam and Petroleum Corporation, from Royal Reeds incident. Bobby Montague was removed from he left 2 different ministries because of scandals. You have Marissa Dalrymple Philibert, who resigned after the Integrity Commission recommended that she be charged. You have recurring issues with the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Auditor General. They are continually being flagged. You have the SSL saga, where they were flagged in 2017 by FSC, and the public was not protected. You have in 2019 the Finance Minister Nigel Clark. He had signed these contracts worth about $1 billion with Ernst & Young, but the government blocked access to the consultancy report, saying it was in draft at the time. And to add insult to injury, the government did not sign the Code of Conduct. You know, the Code of Conduct speaks of 7 principles of public life: selflessness.
That's the Code
integrity,
of Conduct from the Integrity Commission, yes?
The Nolan Principle. The Nolan Principles.
Yeah, accountability, openness, honesty, leadership, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then what is disturbing, for example, the Prime Minister had promised that when he came into office, he would draft an impeachment bill, and that provides some degree of accountability. Years later, even recently when they were looking at the reform, the opportunity came for such a bill to be drafted, and it was not. And then more recently, there's this, I don't even know what to call it, with the Integrity Commission findings of the Prime Minister. The report is over 170 pages long. I mean, he hasn't been charged or convicted of anything, but it really does not look good. Several accounts and several businesses that made profits, and there were no, they did not file returns.
They filed nil returns. Nil returns.
Yes, I'm sorry. You are correct. Filed nil returns. Money being taken from a charity to buy bonds. Just a lot of different, it's not like it's one issue. There's a multiplicity of things. And according to the report, according to them, there's information that they requested from him that he refused to give them. So I'm just saying, it's not just one person or one incident. There's a multiplicity. It's like a recurring decimal. And we see it. So what I'm talking about, the things that we actually see, this is not hearsay. So I'm not surprised, but there's something else I must say.
All right, hold it there
It's not a GLP problem.
Hold it there for us, Dr. Abrams. We're up on the break. Stay with us. Dr. Michael Abrams, Dr. Perkins, and Marlon Morgan. Stay with us.
Clearing personal, non-commercial shipments at the port? Avoid the wait. Request a contactless clearance through your agent today. It's more efficient. It's secure. The time by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
14 minutes to 6.
Upgrade your kitchen and bathroom to the next level with Unique Living. They're the ultimate destination for all your kitchen and bathroom needs, from luxurious shower systems to exquisite faucets, vanities, sinks, toilets, closets, and more. They have it all. Visit shop number 6, 30 Dunrobin Avenue, Kingston 10, or call them at 876-755-3661. Elevate your space with Unique Living, where quality meets expectations.
Attention motorists, it's time to switch to the T-Tag on Highway 2000 East West. The T-Tag system reduces the amount of cash handled at our toll plazas and makes it safer for our staff and motorists at the toll booths. The T-Tag makes it quicker, more cost efficient, and safer for our customers. So switch to the T-Tag today and experience the convenience. T-Tag packages are discounted to only $1,500, including a $500 toll credit from now until September 30.
Imagine opening a bank account without ever leaving your home. Well, at CIBC Caribbean, we've changed the game. Open a new CIBC savings or checking account completely online using your computer or phone, anywhere, anytime. No need to visit the bank, no waiting in line. Just apply, verify, and sign your documents, all online. It's secure, seamless, and 100% digital. Open your new CIBC account by applying online today.
Make lasting impressions. Register now for the Make Your Mark Business and Personal Etiquette Conference set for October 30 at the Jamaica Pegasus. Sponsored by Caledonia Outdoor Advertising, Monographic Printers, JPS, Nationwide News Network, Supply County, Jamaica Broilers Group, From Thought to Finish, Intelligent Multimedia Limited, Visual Tech Solutions, the Jamaica Observer, and Main Event Group. Come make your mark and attend the Business and Personal Etiquette Conference October 30. Call 876-978-6001 or visit www.makeyourmarkgroup.com now to register.
Good afternoon. 11 minutes going up to 6 o'clock. We're discussing the latest Blue Dot poll findings powered by Total Tools. Today's big poll result: 51% of Jamaicans says Prime Minister Holness is leading an extremely corrupt government. That's 51%. And more troublingly, for labor rights and for the country, 24%. That's 1 in 4 Labour Party supporters are of the view that their government is extremely corrupt. We're getting perspectives from Dr. Michael Abrams, Dr. Anna Perkins, and a member of the JLP's Communications Task Force, Marlon Morgan. Just before we
If I could, Cliff.
Yes.
If I could, Cliff, just to pick up on where Dr. Abrams left off there, he said this corruption problem is not just a JLP problem. And I want to pick up on that with Dr. Perkins, because I wonder, Dr. Perkins, in a country where the general perception of corruption is high, Jamaica ranks among the lowest 3 countries in the Caribbean in terms of corruption. How should we view these poll findings in that context? That the Jamaican people broadly seem to think that corruption is rampant in the society.
No, that the poll is a snapshot of people's perceptions at a particular point in time. There's no doubt that this particular poll may well have been influenced by the recent IC report on the Prime Minister and the issues raised by that report, issues having to do with possibly illicit enrichment, misrepresentation, abuse of authority, all of those things that were raised by that particular report. But as has been painted by Michael, and I think he did a really good job of laying out a sad litany of the current concerns around the particular government, even as he's saying to us, look, I'm not suggesting that these issues are singular to this particular political party, but we recognize that we do have a larger problem in our political culture and how people have found and had their trust in politics and politicians undermined. But for me, what's going on here, though, is that we should be looking more closely at matters having to do with moral leadership. I heard Marlon saying the JLP is not tone deaf and so on. Did we hear Michael's litany? And a lot of it tied to the issues having to do with the PM and what's going on there. This is a prime minister that I said to us, and we take our hat off to him, that he believes and agrees that political leadership should be held to a higher standard. And until political leadership can match those kind of statements with the kind of actions that they should take as individuals, then what we're going to find continuing is that the public trust in our political directorate, in our political process, in our governance will continue to go down. The ranking for Jamaica will continue to hover around the 69 and 70s and so on. And the index itself, we've never gotten out of that serious corruption index, because a lot of what we're doing is around talking about not being tone deaf, talking about believing we should be held to a higher moral standard, but really not matching that with sufficient and meaningful and believable action. So you think that with the kind of report coming out of the IC, for example, I have to say that as a Jamaican citizen, I'm particularly disappointed hearing some of the conversations that came out of the IC Oversight Committee's discussion today, and that there was a recognition that even if you're calling into question the procedures that the IC did or didn't do well, or how did we get to the point of the IC now being accused of corruption? How do we get to the point of not recognizing that what has been put on the table is sufficient for us to ask questions as to whether moral leadership continues to be in place, and why is it that we wouldn't want to have the entire process play itself out, so that whether there is a possibility of the leader being cleared or the leader being indicted, that all of that happens? Why are we continuing to work at undermining the very processes that we have put in place? And Marlon said that the current government resources, that the current government put together the IC Act and all of that. But it does seem like the current government is undermining the very thing that is
Dr. Perkins,
Perkins,
just
sure
before
we're not corrupt. Talk to us, Marlon.
Dr. Perkins, just before Marlon responds, because it sounds to me that the litany of advancements as he sees them that he laid out could be considered substantive advancements, the increasing of the Integrity Commission's budget, funding of the FID. Those things are tangible movements, the passing of the act, making sure the commission is properly staffed, that kind of a thing. But it sounded to me like what you were outlining were more principled positions, that you think they, even notwithstanding the substantive advancements, some principled problems exist. For example, you say the Prime Minister made commitments, some of those have not been met. You talked about what happened in the committee hearing this afternoon. Those things seem to me more form than substance. Am I reading that wrong?
I have to disagree with you on that, Marlon, because the principles on which all of these processes work are important and fundamental. And in fact, it's because those principles continue to be undermined that you find that the trust in our systems continue to go down. And Jamaicans just don't believe that our political processes and our politicians are there to work for them, which is what political leadership is about. It's a fundamental principle of political engagement, that you're there to serve.
Okay, Marlon, you wanted to come in?
It's that you're not there for personal enrichment. And that's what the issue of corruption is about.
Marlon, just a moment, Dr. Perkins. Marlon?
To chime in and say this. The Integrity Commission, not dissimilar to any other public body or entity in the Jamaican landscape, is not above criticism or indeed a sober assessment of the conduct of its affairs or its discharge of its mandate. What persons and critics have been drawing attention to, as we saw earlier today in the Oversight Committee of the Integrity Commission, is that the Integrity Commission had been embarked on a body of investigation, a body of work, and the Prime Minister was the subject of its investigation. And in circumstances where the Integrity Commission expended considerable resources and have legislative or statutory authority to discharge its mandate and complete its report, it dispatched the report to Parliament, and in that same time, and at the same time, it is asking for the report to be referred to the FID. When, during the conduct of its report, it could have and really ought to have engaged the FID as it is able to do in terms of collaborative engagement with competent authority. So, a criticism, Anna and colleagues, of the Integrity Commission is not to be seen as attempts to undermine.
No, not at all, Marlon. But I can accept that. I can accept that as an important critique. If you're correct, no public body is above, as I use your word, sober assessment. But I'm going beyond the suggestion that there have been some procedural matters that can be questioned. But when you turn around and accuse the IC of corruption, you ask questions as to why is it the IC is bringing this forward now? I mean, is this a fishing expedition? What's going on in terms of their competence? People talk about they must be forced to close the report and certify the Prime Minister and so on. To me, those kind of statements undermine the work of the IC. I would go back to your suggestion about it being budget, it being resourced and so on, but then clearly the budget that has been provided has not been sufficient. One, and I'll also suggest to you that even the way that the IC functions can and has been undermined. If a subject of investigation refuses to supply the requisite responses that would help the IC to undertake its report in a way that can allow it to do the kind of closure and certification which it being suggested that should happen and has been happening because there seems to be some form of corruption.
Dr. Perkins,
go ahead, Marlon.
Has emerged from your comment just now is precisely what is at the heart of this entire public discussion. There are some half-truths in all of this and some misunderstandings essentially in all of this. Now, when you think of the IC and its report, that has since been dispatched to Parliament. No one is suggesting that the IC is not able to do its work. What is being called for is a review of the IC's legislation to make it even more fit for purpose, because everyone, sober persons can agree that there have been some curious developments in the conduct and treatment of this particular probe by the Integrity Commission. So, for example, as opposed to referring a matter to the Director of Corruption Prosecution, the Director of Investigation, having realized that his threshold was not met, did not advance it to the DCP, but instead is essentially having a report that hangs in limbo and leaves the declarant in limbo and is referring to the FID. So the truth is, we need to come away with a strengthened IC. And that is what all well-thinking Jamaicans
so long as any kind of changes, Marlon, do not weaken the IC, because some of what I'm hearing and interpreting. So we're talking about perception too. Yeah?
All right. I have Dr. Abrams, and it's 6 o'clock. I want to give you the last word, Dr. Abrams.
Why interrupted me? I was eating my popcorn, watching all this going on. Let me tell you something. We all know in Jamaica that we just have we live in a very corrupt country, and what we're seeing now is just a lot of blatant corruption. And it is not even about the money. Let's say the Prime Minister didn't do anything wrong with the money. There's a lack of transparency, and there's some degree of dishonesty, really, in my opinion. For example, when he was asked on August 17 by journalists if any lawmakers in the JLP were being investigated for illicit enrichment, he said he had asked far and wide but was unable to find anyone. This is August the 17th. On January the 12th, the same year, Mr. Holness was in a face-to-face interview conducted from people from the IC, and they were requesting further written information from him. He was communicated with again on January the 22nd and again on May the 16th.
Well,
so when you look at the multiplicity of issues, and you look at that as well, and the report also said, maybe you know more about this, Marlon, that there was information requested from him that he did not give
into his personal expenses, which the IC knows he is not obliged or under an obligation under law to provide. Many persons don't practically go around and keep a journal of their personal expenses, where they bought jerk chicken or where they stopped to support a fish fry in their constituency.
I don't think that's what jerk chicken and fish fry do, Marlon. I really doubt it.
We have to if it's necessary to provide it, to clear your name, and to provide the kind... Marlon, I'm talking over you. What I'm saying, though, is that if it's necessary to provide that information in order to help the IC to come to a clearer understanding of material that has been presented, why would that?
But it may simply not be practical so to do. Do you
Gentlemen,
keep a journal
lady, we have to leave it there.
You know that's not what they're asking for. They're not asking for where he bought jerk chicken last Thursday.
Cliff, I suspect we'll have to continue this conversation.
So come on.
Well, we have to leave it there.
Conversation.
Dr. Anna Perkins, Dr. Michael Abrams, Marlon Morgan, thank you very much for being with us. It's been a robust discussion. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, lady and gentlemen. Ricardo Brooks.
Thank you.
We're going to hand it over to you now from the AC Marriott at the Sterling Investor Briefing.
Thank you, Cliff. So, after the break, listeners, we will begin this outside broadcast formally. As you heard from Cliff, we're coming to you from the AC Hotel in St. Andrew for the Sterling Investor Briefing. And I have an interview with Charles Ross, the company, who will talk to us about the company performance and outlook. After the break. Soon come.
Cover Story was brought to you by Hyundai. Modern, premium, affordable vehicles.
We a big deal when we touch what you grow. Yeah, I can't see what we're pulling up. Anything for the taste, what we love. Barbecue, spicy and original, flavorful, crispy, irresistible. 3 piece with the fries and a Pepsi. Go get your one big deal, stop stress me. All when we dip on the toilet, no left feet. It's a big deal. Anything for the taste of a juicy, crunchy, irresistible KFC, big deal. 3 pieces of delicious chicken, fries and Pepsi. KFC, it's finger licking good.
Say goodbye to stuffy air and hello to clean air. Call the air conditioning experts, Getty's Refrigeration Limited, for all your indoor air quality needs. Their duct cleaning services will leave your home or office feeling fresh and healthy. Call them at 876-923-652123 or email grljasocialmedia@gmail.com. Located at 226 Spanish Town Road, Kingston 11. Breathe easy with Getty's Refrigeration Limited.
Imagine opening a bank account without ever leaving your home. Well, at CIBC Caribbean, we've changed the game. Open a new CIBC savings or checking account completely online using your computer or phone, anywhere, anytime. No need to visit the bank, no waiting in line. Just apply, verify, and sign your documents, all online. It's secure, seamless, and 100% digital. Open your new CIBC account by applying online today.
Yes, Kemlani Mart is making deals.
Really? Deals like what?
On scratch, dented, new furniture and appliances.
Oh, that's great.
And that's not all. Kemlani Mart has tiles, toilets, doors at crazy low prices.
So I can make a deal on a sofa set?
Of course, and dining room sets, outdoor furniture, ACs and more. No reasonable offer will be refused.
Only at Kemlani Mart, Manor Center and 77 King Street.
I love this place, you see.
Good evening, good evening. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Nationwide at 5. I'm Ricardo Brooks and I'm coming to you live from the AC Hotel in St. Andrew for the Sterling Investor Briefing. We have with us now Charles Ross and Eugene Stanley. Mr. Ross will be talking to us about the company performance and outlook, and Mr. Stanley will be providing us with a market update. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Nationwide at 5.
Good evening, Ricardo.
Good evening, Ricardo, and thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for being with me. Let me start with you, Mr. Ross. Walk us through now the performance of Sterling Management. What are some of the key drivers that have, ensured that your performance is robust in the last quarter or year?
Well, the interesting thing is that the pandemic was very good to us. Our profits...
you don't hear that a lot.
No, it was. Ironically, our profits were up about 60%. And they've really maintained that level since then. So it was last year was really a very good year for us again. It was pretty close to our record profits. And this year we're expecting even a better performance because interest rates should be coming down. And that will certainly boost our operating profits.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of plans, how the company plans to maintain that kind of profitability and that kind of edge, what are some of those plans?
Well, we like to stick to basics, and that really involves delivering extraordinary service to our clients, giving them the best advice, tailored to their circumstances. And we've found that doing that, we get a lot of business from referrals, word of mouth. So that we expect that we'll continue to grow, on that basis.
Mm-hmm. Charles Ross has talked about the fact that, we expect interest rates to come down, Eugene Stanley. Broadly speaking now, what's the state of the market in terms of investment?
Okay, so as it relates to interest rate falling, we have seen that not only locally, but also in international markets as well. Just getting back to the local side, BOJ had its first rate cut in August, on August 20th. They cut the rate by 25 basis points to 6.75%. That's their policy rate. And the expectation is that they will continue to bring that rate lower over time. However, their next meeting is actually later this month on September 30th. And some element of doubt has now been cast on them making an additional rate cut, given that the last reading on inflation for August saw the inflation rate jumping on a month-over-month basis, 2.4% for the month of August, causing the year-over-year rate to spike to 6.5% and falling outside of their targeted range. So they may take the cautious approach and watch to see if inflation gets back within target before they make another adjustment. However, they may be influenced by what has taken place internationally with the U.S. Federal Reserve in particular, who last week adjusted their policy rate by 50 basis points, which is being defined as a large rate cut,
Right.
typically cut by 25 basis points. And one of the reasons why the U.S. Federal Reserve did that was they kind of want to preserve the economic gains that they've had. There were a lot of talk that the U.S. economy would hit a recession given the aggressive response that the central bank took to rein in inflation, the most aggressive rate hiking campaign in 40 years, because of the extent to which inflation had gone, 40-year high, peaking at 9.1% in June of 2022. It has now fallen to 2.5% as of August, and the forecast is that by 2025 it should get down to 2.1% with a close to the Fed's target. So that 50 basis points adjustment by the Fed is a starting point. They also forecast that they will cut by an additional 50 basis points for the remainder of this year. They're looking at 100 basis points of cut for 2025, and top that off with a 50 basis points cut in 2026. So all told, you're looking at a downward revision of the Fed policy rate, some 200 basis points. Now, sure.
Go ahead.
No, that we're now into a lower rate environment, or we're embarking on a lower rate environment, and that will continue for at least another 2 years.
And how are your investors assessing the situation in the market? Do you find that they're more bullish? Are there jitters? Are they more reluctant to invest? How are they assessing the situation in the market?
Yeah, I find that they're more bullish. They're certainly encouraged by what they're seeing. One of the good things about the Fed reducing rates, or the ability of the Fed reducing rates now, it is not a situation where the Fed is forced to cut rates because there is a recession or severe economic weakness in the United States. It's really because they can afford to, and they are really doing this because they want to preserve the economic gains. So it means that the economy is in a fairly good shape, which augurs well for investments overall. And the fact that rates are also coming down mean that investors, certainly long-term investors, who have been encouraging for quite some time to start looking at investing in longer dated securities, locking in those higher yields for a longer period of time, they certainly are enjoying the benefits of those early decisions that they took when we advised them to do so. So they find that the value of their investments have been improving, and they're enjoying income, relatively high income, for a longer period of time as a result.
Based on those decisions they made.
Certainly.
Both of you talked about providing high-quality advice. Yeah, and I wondered if, Charles Ross, you could take us through what makes Sterling Asset Management different, because you talked about, you stick to the basic principles, and that has, assisted in profitability. But talk to our listeners about what sets you apart.
Well, we have great people like Eugene, for example, but we also make sure that we take advantage of the latest and best technology that's available. So we actually have 3 Bloomberg terminals in our office, and what that means...
And for the benefit of my listeners who do not know what a Bloomberg terminal is,
Okay.
What is that?
Well, Bloomberg terminal is, let's say, a window into the global financial market.
So you can monitor...
yes,
okay.
and it also has a tremendous amount of information on the securities that are out there, the issuers, the central bank policy, a lot of information as well as a lot of techniques and facilities for analyzing that information. So that really means that we're at the cutting edge of the market. We can form our own assessments as to where the market is going, how we should protect ourselves or how we should take advantage of these developments. And so a lot of research goes into and a lot of information gathering goes into the advice that we give, the securities that we offer to people. And I think that's really what sets us apart.
Would you agree, Eugene?
Certainly. It's the Bloomberg terminal also allows us to connect and interact with our international brokers. That's how we get our global reach. All the brokers that we do business with or trades with, they're also on the Bloomberg terminal, and we interact with them via the Bloomberg terminal as well.
For the listeners who may be thinking, okay, I need to be I'm going to call it a high-value investor. I need to really be in a particular demographic grouping to even think of approaching Sterling Asset Management. What would you say to them?
Well, we certainly don't discriminate according to age or any other quality.
Right, because I'm seeing some young people here.
Right.
Yes.
It's really about your attitude, your objectives. Our investors tend to be longer term in their outlook. They tend to be a little more conservative. But what people don't realize is that you can get capital growth with fixed income investments. You get not just income, you can also get capital growth. So, we're open for anybody who's looking for good, sound, medium to long-term investments, who is investing for the medium to long term. If you're investing for your pension or, your child's education 10, 15 years down the road, or just building a nest egg that you want to have for, years to come, then you probably would make an ideal Sterling customer.
The only thing I would add there is that there are regulatory minimums in terms of the investments that we can offer to clients. So for instance, the Financial Services Commission requires a minimum investments of, say, US 10,000 or the equivalent thereof for you to be able to subscribe to, say, one of our products. So those are just some examples. So regulatory minimums also play a role in terms of who you can offer your services to.
And when the average Jamaican hears about investments, they think, okay, dividends. Is there a general policy that governs how dividends are paid at Sterling?
Well, we have a listed entity, Sterling Investments, and that has a dividend policy set by the directors of the company. And I think they pay out 80% of received income. So that's the company policy, and that's what they do. But in the fixed income space, you're really looking at interest income, coupons on your bonds, or the interest rate on your repurchase agreements, and something like that. And again, in the global market, there's a wide range of securities available with different yields, different coupons, different credit ratings, different risks associated with them. And so we help investors really to navigate that and to make selections that meet their objectives and their risk tolerance.
Beyond the reduction in interest rates, are there any other major developments in the market that you're looking out for or anticipating?
Well, certainly there are always things happening. We still have a couple wars going on. There's war in Europe, there's war in the Middle East. So those are always risks that we have to pay attention to. And although hope is not a strategy, but hope that those don't escalate into something much worse, because it will create certainly great upheaval for the globe as a whole. So those are the other risks that we look at. But immediately outside of those, I'm not seeing anything of significance for markets right now. The main focus is that one of the risks that we have to place close attention to is whether or not the loan of interest rates causes a reacceleration in inflation and then causes central bank to then go back to a situation of raising rates again. That's a risk to watch, because then that would then create another hysteria in markets. So that's one of the risks that we also have to pay attention to, whether there is a reignition of inflation.
Would you say your outlook for the macroeconomic environment here in Jamaica locally is positive?
It's looking better than last year in terms of the outlook, given that the central bank has started to adjust its policy rate downwards. We still have the challenges of anemic growth, and that doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon, unless some fundamental changes are made to the economy. But certainly from policy enabling stance with low interest rates will certainly encourage more economic activity, lower borrowing costs for companies looking to raise debt to whether refinance existing debt or for expansion purposes. That certainly will redound to the benefit of growth locally and just maintain the pace of economic expansion. I noted that for the first quarter of this year, that growth was 1.4% if you compare that to the first quarter of 2023, and over the fourth quarter was 0.3%, and that was an improvement from 0.1% in the fourth quarter. So there had been a little bit of a pickup in growth. Hopefully with lower rates to come, we could see a little bit more frenetic pace in the growth sphere. All right,
gentlemen, I won't keep you much longer because I see that Charles Ross is slated to welcome the audience. Listeners, we're at the Sterling Investor Briefing at the AC Hotel in St. Andrew. Charles Ross is going to go on the inside now to welcome his audience and present the Sterling Asset Management Review for 2024. Eugene Stanley, Charles Ross, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you, Ricardo.
We're going to go to the break, listeners, and come back with more. We're going to take you inside where that welcome will happen. Soon come.
On Sunday, August 11th, in the quiet community of Cherry Tree Lane in Clarendon, our entire nation was shaken by a brutal act of violence.
Gangsters mercilessly took the lives of 8 innocent Jamaicans, including a 7-year-old boy.
These criminals will strike again, destroying more families and more communities unless we stand together to stop them.
If you have any information that can help bring these killers to justice, please share it with the security forces.
The government has established a reward fund of $25 million for information leading to the arrest and charge of the perpetrators who committed this heinous act.
The facilitators who supply them with the arms, intelligence, and the transportation.
And those who harbor and protect these criminals after the crime.
If you know something, say something.
Call Crime Stop at 311, MOCA at 888-6622-847, the NIB at 811, or JDF at 837-8888.
Together, we will defeat the gangs
and develop a culture of peace in our country.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
With so much to do in one location, make Megamart your one-stop shop. Pick up your groceries and houseware needs, grab a bite and pay some bills, fill your prescriptions and see the beauty products in our pharmacy. All in one amazing location. My Megamart, the best value by far.
Tie your laces, put on something purple, and support the CIBC Caribbean Walk for the Cure. Join us at Hope Gardens on Sunday, October 6th at 6 a.m. We're walking, running, and moving in the fight against cancer. Sign up today at runningeventsja.com. Registration fee $3,000 includes your Walk for the Cure t-shirt while supplies last. CIBC Walk for the Cure, Sunday, October 6th, 6 a.m. at Hope Gardens. All proceeds in aid of the Jamaica Cancer Society.
Couples need constant contact to keep the current and fire in the relationship. It can't be once in a while with below average performance, or you know what will likely happen? Another chef will be in the kitchen cooking that dish. But some people require a lot of deep affection and even add some perks to spice up the pot. How important is it for the act of cooking between partners to be really great while they iron out the kinks? Join me, Rodney Campbell, every Tuesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. for Affairs of the Heart, right here on Nationwide 90 FM. This Tuesday's topic: if the pot and stove are great, how many ways you serve the food on the plate?
Affairs of the Heart is brought to you by Supermed Pharmacy. Super happy, super healthy, Supermed.
Thank you so much for staying with us here on Nationwide at 5. If you're just joining us, I'm Ricardo Brooks, and I'm coming to you live from the AC Hotel in St. Andrew for the Sterling Investor Briefing. We just had a conversation with Charles Ross talking to us about the company performance and outlook, and Eugene Stanley talking to us about their assessment of the conditions in the market. Charles Ross is now offering the welcome, and we take you inside to take some of that, as well as the Sterling Asset Management Review for 2024.
From September 2023. So the question of whether or not the recent high interest rates and monetary tightening will lead to a recession in the US still remains very much on the agenda. Now, while there's been a significant, or rather a slight uptick in unemployment in the US, the labor market softening somewhat, consumer spending is still strong, and the sentiment is leaning towards the achievement of a soft landing. In other words, the US inflation coming down, interest rates coming down without a recession developing. It's very unlikely that we'll have a recession in 2024, but we still have a long way to go before we get to what's called the neutral rate, where the Fed will likely pause interest rates. So a lot can happen between now and then. The good news for us is that so far developments have gone pretty much according to what we were expecting. The Fed started their interest rate easing cycle a little later than we thought, but by starting with a 50 basis point reduction, we're really more or less back on track in terms of where we thought we would be at this point in time. They're projecting another 50 basis points of reductions before the end of this year, and 100 basis points of reductions in 2025. So, on the one hand, we can expect interest rates to continue falling, bond prices to continue strengthening. But what we will find a challenge doing is finding attractive yields, anything close to what we've seen in the last year. So basically our advice to investors would be to get into the market as soon as you can, because it's likely that over the next couple of years, we'll just have more of the same: interest rates falling, inflation falling, and security prices rising. Now, Sterling's focus on credit quality has meant that the recovery in bond prices has boosted our balance sheet, with our capital to total assets ratio now standing at around 20%, and our capital to risk-weighted assets ratio standing at over 30%. These ratios compare to the statutory minimums of 6% and 10% respectively. Also, we've managed to remain very profitable over the period, and with falling interest rates reducing our cost of funds, we expect that the future developments will boost our operating performance. So our panelists this evening will help us to explore what all this means for us here in Jamaica. And we look forward to your questions and comments, both during the formal proceedings and afterwards over drinks. So thanks again for coming. Thanks again for the confidence that you've placed with us over the years. And we assure you that we'll continue to serve you with the care and diligence that we've done for the past 23 years. We hope this evening's discussion is interesting, and we hope that you continue to enjoy the evening. Thank you.
That was Charles Ross offering the welcome here at Sterling Assets Investor Briefing. We're going to hear now from Marian Ross, who is the moderator. She's also going to introduce the panelists for the evening.
Moderating a panel discussion this evening. A very special welcome, a very special welcome to our listeners on Nationwide News. We are live on the radio tonight, so I'm asking the crowd to be well behaved in the Q&A section. Tonight, we'll be discussing the topic, rate cuts, recession, market correction. What is next for investors? We'll have a 40-minute discussion followed by some Q&A, questions and answers. Giving us their best crystal ball insights this evening are our three panelists. And if you'll give me a few minutes, I'll start by introducing them. So I'm waiting for one to come up on the screen, but I'll start with those of us in person first. To my furthest left is Mr. Keith Collister. Keith is no stranger to some of you here. As you know, he's a leading financial journalist and commentator with a background in economics and finance. He's been to some of the best schools the UK has to offer. His bio is very extensive, so I don't think we could get through all of it tonight. So I'll just summarize it by saying Keith is executive chairman at ATL Pension Fund. He's a board director at EPLI, and he's also actively involved in the economic affairs committees at the JCC and the PSOJ. We're all very grateful for his involvement. For those of you who don't know, Keith is very frequently contacted by global rating agencies, global investment banks, and in fact major multilaterals about the Jamaican economy. So we figured that we should get his view here as well. So Keith, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And next in line is Mr. Charles Ross, our president and founder. Charles actually spent 15 years of his life as a civil engineer, building schools, houses, and water infrastructure across the island. But after experiencing his first recession in the construction industry, he realized he needed to switch jobs. So he founded Sterling a little over 24 years ago, with the goal of bringing safer, higher yielding, and higher quality investments to the region. And in his role as president for the past 20 years or 24 years, the company has generated a return on equity in excess of 20% per annum. So Charles will be sharing his insights from his perspective as an investor. And last but certainly not least is our panelist joining via Zoom, Mr. Henry Mooney. And my IT team, do I have a Mr. Henry in my Zoom waiting room? Okay, great, here he is. Hi, Henry, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Henry.
And of course, I can't hear Henry because we're live, but I heard him in the test. So while they wait...
Can you hear me now?
Perfectly.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Henry. So just a quick intro on Henry. Henry is the principal economist and senior advisor within the Caribbean Country Department at the IDB. Henry has over 20 years of experience across both the private and multilateral sectors. He's worked in dozens of countries in Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Henry is also a widely published author. You can find his articles in The Economist, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, Reuters, and dozens of other media outlets. So Henry, we're very happy to have you join us here today. Thank you. So before we get into the questions, I just wanted to frame the discussion briefly. try to provide a very brief description of the environment we're in and some of the most frequently asked questions we get from investors. It's no secret, as Charles mentioned, as we can all see, the environment around us is changing. We're moving from a higher interest rate type monetary policy regime globally to a looser one. Even the Bank of Jamaica is lowering rates. So a central theme in our discussion that I'd like to pose and frame to our panelists is, how do we position ourselves, how do investors position themselves to ensure that these changes benefit them? So I'd just like you to bear that in mind as we speak to the listeners and the audience here tonight. As I mentioned to Keith, initially we'll start with the macro and work our way down to the micro. So my first question, and I guess I will start with, I guess, Henry, since you're the foreigner, and my first question is on the U.S. economy. I'll start with you. My first question, what does the growth and health of the U.S. economy look like in the next year?
So thanks very much. Again, I hope you can hear me. Please let me know if you can't. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. As mentioned, it's great to see, by the way, Keith Collister there, who I've known for several years and have worked with in the past and continue to work with. So just before I say anything, let me preface everything by saying, while I do work for the Inter-American Development Bank, any views that I express tonight are my own, not that of my employer. That said, and currently I'm working on the Caribbean primarily, so I'm not focused exclusively on looking at advanced economies like the US and its growth, though I have done that in the past. In fact, I was once a central banker. I worked for Canada's central bank, so I have some insights at least into the central banking dilemma that we have all been discussing for several years, and that is starting to become a more interesting story. I mean, look, I think probably the best answer to a question like this is to talk a little bit about what we're seeing this past week in terms of the Fed policy rate change. I think that's probably the most consequential point of departure here. I mean, I think as has been discussed before, I was listening in earlier on. The Fed came out with last week with a 50 basis point adjustment, which in many respects is quite surprising. It's an outsized adjustment. Most people would, most commentators thought that we were going to expect a 25 basis point adjustment, which historically was the increment that the Fed had used in relatively normal times in terms of policy adjustment, one direction or another. I think the 50 basis point change tells us something in itself. It's an outsized move, even though the Fed has come out and gone to great lengths to tell us that that should not be seen as the new pace of adjustment, that it was just the first move. I think what it tells us is the Fed acknowledges that it's slightly behind the curve, right? In as much as there's an inflection point, it's no longer focused on one of its two-pillar mandate, which is price stability. Clearly, it is of the opinion that inflation has been tamed, all other things equal, and that it now must shift focus to its second pillar, which is full employment, right? So I think the 50 basis point adjustment tells you something right there, that obviously the Fed has decided that focusing on maintaining an economy that is robust is where it needs to focus. I think so. I think that really is probably the most telling sign that we have currently in terms of what we're seeing. That the Fed itself is acknowledging that actually the economy is now the new focus going forward. Now, of course, being a central banker is an exceedingly difficult job, and one that is, where central bankers are blamed for inflation, for booms and busts, for financial crises, for recessions, where they are certainly not in control of all of the factors that underpin that. So I would say, looking forward, one set of question marks that will have an influence on the U.S. economic performance going forward is going to be the uncertainty around the upcoming election, for example, and what that's going to mean for fiscal policy. Obviously, in the next year or two, the path of U.S. economic policy is going to be significantly influenced by what the outcome in November. whether that's tax policy, expenditure policy, investment policy. I think that these are all key issues that we don't know enough about now. We don't have enough certainty about now. But I think that from the investor point of view, from the market's point of view, that 50 basis point reduction easing by the Fed is really pointing to the fact that the economy, while it continues to perform, is now the focus of attention, and that it's going to need some stimulus in order to continue in this Goldilocks path that we seem to be in, which is a soft or no landing scenario. Most people are saying soft landing, which means no recession. I think you can also argue it's a no landing scenario where the plane comes close to the runway, but then accelerates and takes off again. But I think that's really where we are.
Thanks, Henry. So if I'm getting it correctly, I think you're in the soft landing camp?
I think, yes, I would put myself in the soft landing camp. I don't see a recession coming, but I certainly do see risks on the horizon to the economy that the Fed is trying to get ahead of with this outsized move of 50 basis.
Got it. Thanks, Henry. I'm hoping we have at least one contradicting view in person on the panel. Keith, would you like to go next? Where do you see the U.S. economy in the next year? Hard or soft landing?
I think I'm in the soft landing camp like Henry. Clearly the economy is decelerating a bit. You're seeing that in the hiring, some of the employment numbers, and so on. However, there's something called the SAM rule, which supposedly says if the unemployment rate goes up 50 basis points, then maybe you have a proper recession. I think that's not really the case at this time, because I think it seems like this time is different. I mean, you have to be very careful saying that, of course, but it does seem like you've come off an unusual COVID-induced recession. You've had an unusual job market. How I would characterize it is that, and this is something that we internally at ATL Pension Fund we've been thinking for a number of years. You have a situation in the US where the COVID created a decline in the consumer, the services portion of the economy, and you had an increase in the amount of goods purchased. So I'm trying to make this quite simple, but so you've had a recovery now in the services economy, reach out and touch. Tourism is a good example, and actually that's one of the things that's allowed one to see this very clearly, being in the tourist sector and looking at US consumer demand. So you've had that recovery in the services sector. You've had a weakish goods sector now in the US for a while, but basically the services sector is much bigger, way bigger than the manufacturing or goods sector in the United States, and so the recovery has continued. And if you also combine that with the fact that you've had this huge fiscal stimulus, fiscal deficit of 6%, other countries hit a constraint such as Jamaica way earlier than the US will. And not to say they can never hit a constraint, by the way, but probably it's not yet. So if you combine those two things, I think that suggests that we're still in the soft landing period of the economy in the US. There was one other thing I was going to mention, is that whilst I've said that this is where we are, clearly the economy is softening. You can also see that again, I'm using the US consumer demand and talking specifically about tourism. One is seeing that now, and so I do think that you're in a soft economy period, and I do think the Fed. I I should have written this, by the way, but I actually wasn't very surprised that they cut 50 basis points simply because I thought they're late. The Fed is late, but it's not too late. It's only a few months late. Right. So it's not terminal, and I don't think it means that the US is about to go into recession. It just means that they probably should have cut a little earlier. Right. So that would be my quick comment there. Hopefully that's in line with what Henry thinks too.
I like that perspective a lot, Keith. I would actually add that, delaying for sure has had impacts. I like the point you made that, you're seeing the impact on tourism. I think maybe for other reasons as well, technology and otherwise, we're seeing an impact on the global services industry as well. And it's a nice pivot into my next question. Charles, I'm cheating you on the first question because you told us that you already told us you're pro soft landing, but maybe you can tell us kind of how do we think that the outcome in the U.S., not election, the U.S. economic outcome will affect Jamaica and the Jamaican economy?
Well, yeah. Well, the old saying is that if the U.S. sneezes, we catch a cold. So tourism is our largest industry. 70% of our visitors come from the US. So for sure, it will affect us. The next largest source of foreign exchange is remittances. If there is rising unemployment in the States, if the economy softens, I guess it'll affect our brothers and sisters that live over there, and it may affect remittances. So for sure, a weakening US economy would not be good news for Jamaica. Now, the question about, will it be different this time? I think that's probably one of the big questions. Yes, at the moment, everything does look like a soft landing is the most likely outcome, but monetary policy does work with long lags. So the jury is still out. We have to see what happens over the next 12 months or so.
Thanks. Henry, do you have a perspective on that? How the outcome of how the behavior of the U.S. economy would affect us, your outlook for the Jamaican economy?
What we just heard, in fact, at the IDB, we did do a lot of work during COVID in particular, looking at the impact, the significance, for example, of the tourism sector, both directly and indirectly, not just for Jamaica, but for countries across the Caribbean. So absolutely, if and when demand for that product, for those services declines, that could have a significant implication. So again, it hinges on the degree to which you think the U.S. economy is going to soften. Time will tell. Time will tell. I think from my perspective, the performance of the U.S. economy and how policies adjust in the U.S. over the next couple of years. I think there's another dimension that goes beyond just the near-term impact of short-term interest rate changes. The beginning of the easing cycle for the Fed. I think one story, and maybe we come back to this at some later point in a different context, but I think one story that is going to be important for developing emerging economies like Jamaica coming, in the future is, we know where we started. We know what the Fed just did. We know what the dot plots are telegraphing to us over the next 24 months. But the new neutral interest rate in the United States is probably going to look quite different, assuming everything goes to plan, than what we have become accustomed to over the course of the last decade, right? We have been in the low for long since the great financial crisis environment where markets, investors, balance sheets have become accustomed to near zero interest rates for various reasons, responding to crises and the like. But I think what's probably going to happen, what is more likely to happen, is that we get back to a more normal interest rate environment where the Fed's neutral interest rate is somewhere in the 3 to 4% range, right? Which is what the dot plots are telling us. And what history tells us, if we look back before the great financial crisis, historically, that's where it was. And I think emerging markets have benefited tremendously from the search for yield driven by the low for long phenomenon or lack of yield in safe assets like the US Treasury. So I think in a year or two, when things, start to shake out, there is where I have some thoughts, some concerns about, where we end up with, a relatively robust real yield in the United States for safe assets like treasuries and U.S. equities, U.S. fixed income instruments. Where does that leave the rest of the world, especially emerging markets that have benefited tremendously from these capital flows linked to the low for long and lack of real positive yields in the United States and other advanced economies? So that's a slightly different question, but I think that has to do with the prospects for performance of the U.S. economy in steady state, and that will be a different environment from the one we have become accustomed to in the last decade.
Thanks, Henry. You raised some really good points there, and I guess maybe the first question I would ask, and maybe I would ask this to Charles, is would a higher neutral Fed rate be a net positive for investors who are looking for yield? Now that rates are in theory would be higher, assuming spreads don't go any tighter, but would you say that's a positive for investors going forward, a higher range of Fed funds rate? Would investors here be able to access higher yields?
Well, for sure, investors would love to get higher yields. So if interest rates don't go back to zero or, back as low as they have in the recent past, that would be good. But on the other hand, higher interest rates will have a dampening effect on investment and economic activity. So, it's a bit of a trade-off. But for sure, for the fixed income investor, bring on the higher rates, I guess.
So just pivoting back to the macro in that case, Keith, you mentioned that Jamaica had already maybe started to feel some of the softness that the U.S. economy was experiencing. So my wild card question to you is the Bank of Jamaica easing fast enough based on the softening in the U.S. as well as what's going on here?
Well, my view is that the Bank of Jamaica is a little later than the Fed. So the way I would look at it is that, the business people, and Richard Biles actually said this in his meeting, you started to see signs when you spoke to the business people from about March, let's call it, that, and this is his own words, but I agree with him, that the economy was softening here. So you've had a Q2 that I think the projection, or maybe it's the final version, which is basically flat. You've got them projecting for the full year, a possible negative, the full fiscal year, a possible negative number. And, if you look at it on a sectoral basis, you'll see, as I said, tourism starting to flatten, and maybe we'll see if it actually goes down, but certainly flattening. The post-COVID recovery, which was sharp, has ended. You saw it right up to the end of last year, really. But at least for Jamaica and some Caribbean islands, it continued, right? But and Jamaica and Bahamas may have had some special factors in terms of traveling warnings. But it's starting to look more general, in my view, that you're seeing a sort of flattening on the U.S. consumer demand, tourism-driven front, and so basically, I would say you look at the construction sector here. It's really down from last year. BPO, which is another major supplier, user of labor, and also a reasonable significant FX earnings looks like it's no longer expanding. So manufacturing similarly is kind of weakish. So basically, you look like an economy that is sort of stagnating and returning to this, let's call it our traditional 1 to 2% of economic growth. And that's the good scenario. That's actually probably not the scenario that we're facing in the very short term over the next few quarters. They're probably closer to stall, which is why I believe the BOJ needs to take advantage of the clear signal from the US that they're cutting rates. I think that we should cut rates a little bit faster than the US. But I understand that they want to keep some level of parity there, but in my view, our economy is weaker than the US's, and therefore we need sharper cuts. Just as we had a sharper rise going up, I think we need a slightly sharper cut going down. So that's my view on that.
I like that perspective, Keith. Thank you. Charles, as the only other Jamaican, quote unquote, in the room, would you like to comment on if the Bank of Jamaica is, easing fast enough? Be careful, we have someone here from the Bank of Jamaica. I didn't warn Keith.
You just told me now. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't warn Keith.
Yeah, well, I'm a little confused by official interest rate policy here because there's so much variation between the quote-unquote policy rate, the 30-day CD rate, the T-bill rate, the yields on longer-term securities. For sure, the Jamaican economy at the best of times is barely growing. And from what Keith says, we are experiencing a softening even of that very anemic growth. So I don't know, it all depends too on inflation. We're having a pickup in local inflation. Is that really the right time to start easing interest rates? I don't know. At the end of the day too, it's not just about interest rates, it's about liquidity and the rate at which that liquidity is growing. And again, it's very difficult to really put your finger on what exactly the policy position of the central bank is, because they will do both things at the same time, inject liquidity and remove it. So I'm just very confused, and I don't know if it's a very simple call.
Okay, fair.
I do want to make a quick comment. The justification they used when inflation went to 5%, which was the previous month or so, I think it's 5.1, was so that was a reason why they justified the recent cut. Now, of course, it's spiked up to 6.5, and I think they're right, that was meant to be because of Vero and the impact on food items and so on. So in my view, and no doubt Henry can speak about this, but I think the IMF agrees that these type of shocks that are coming from this type of scenario, in this case a hurricane, I agree with the BOJ taking the view that, okay, this will pass 3 to 5 months, so we look through that, because that's basically a specific thing that has happened that has caused this rise in inflation, which is basically local food items getting destroyed during a hurricane.
Fair. Henry, any thoughts before I move on how the Jamaican economy is faring and how our monetary policy is responding to the changes elsewhere?
No, I mean, just in agreement. I mean, I think to the last point Keith made, absolutely, as a former central banker myself, transitory shocks are not something that, need to be addressed with monetary policy, certainly one that has long and variable lags, as we understand, right? So I think on that front, certainly the Bank of Jamaica was justified. back to another point made earlier, I think by Keith. I mean, just to underscore the point of the growth path in Jamaica. I actually looked at this earlier on for another publication I was working on. I mean, really, the COVID shock was significant, and it was only at the end of 2023 that real GDP came back to end 2019 levels in Jamaica, right? So yes, we had several years of very strong growth, but we only really just got back to the high water mark of 2019 at the end of last year. So we are sort of returning, as mentioned, to a more normal growth path. And I think, monetary policy is designed to, keep things in balance, demand and supply internally, but it doesn't necessarily change the fundamentals of economic growth potential, right? I think for Jamaica to get beyond that 1% a year, reach its full potential and then beyond, what we need to think about is longer term structural change, right, to make the economy grow faster. And that's going to be a function of more investment in productive sectors and other kinds of realignments that really have not been the story of the last couple of years. So looking forward, hopefully the best we can do is get to a place where the government's fiscal policy continues to get to a place where fiscal space after you reach the debt target is abundant and that you have stability and the private sector can invest more in productive sectors that can help grow the economy. So monetary policy, I think, is, back to a point I made earlier, but central bankers, it's a tough job, because a lot is put on your shoulders and you have very few instruments and there are a lot of things that are out of your control. And I think that this is one of those instances. It's not really down to the central bank.
Thank you, Henry. If I didn't know better, I would have thought you worked at the Bank of Jamaica in a former life. Before I have one last question, but I'll give Charles, did you want to say something in response to Henry's point of monetary policy versus structural change?
Yeah, well, I'm a non-economist, let me say that. And I don't buy the structural argument at all. I think it's a cop-out, which some economists use when they can't really put their finger on the problem. But I think that our problem really is our mix of macroeconomic policy. It seems to me that in Jamaica we've resisted the notion that market economic theory applies in Jamaica. And we don't believe in allowing market forces to set prices and for the market to direct investment into profitable sectors. As a result, we've had 50 years of economic stagnation. So I really do hope that at some point we buy into traditional market economic theory and start constructing our policies in conformity with that.
Thanks, Charles. That's a debate for another panel discussion. Keith, if you really feel very strongly about it, I'll give you the final say before I have my last question.
No, I don't feel super strong about it. I just, and I largely agree with Charles, but we haven't got all the market muscles, if you want to call that we should have in the Jamaican economy. The only thing I would say is I do think structural change, is actually important, because I think what we need to do, and this actually reflects a view. Charles remembers a gentleman called Donald Harris who wrote a book on export-led growth. And the IDB had an economist called Ricardo Hausman, who was their former chief economist, who updated that I think it's an update, and called it growth diagnostics. And basically, a key part of that is his point was you are what you export. And Jamaica's, unfortunately, I don't think it's a coincidence that we kind of export what we did 50 years ago, and now we're kind of, where we are, which is not very far. So I think it's and I do agree, as I wanted to say to Henry, I do agree that the central bank has a difficult job, and it can't really solve all the problems. Absolutely can't solve all the problems. I do have great sympathy for the Bank of Jamaica, and in fact, you know, they've had a very tough, going through COVID is a pretty tough stress test. So I think they've done a pretty good job overall. It's just, I have a little bit of issues on timing and things that relatively minor things. I don't think they've done a bad job. just so they know. And I'm not saying because they can hear me, right? Okay.
Thank you. Well, all right, my last question before we open it up, just something, a takeaway for investors. Could everyone choose one asset class that they think will stand to benefit the most from the reduction in interest rates in the US? And maybe you take one pick in the US and one pick in Jamaica, one asset class each.
Maybe I'll take the opportunity to start. I do think that the tight monetary policy here in Jamaica has depressed the local stock market in a significant way over the last couple of years, both interest rate-wise, but also as much from a liquidity standpoint. We've had very tight liquidity here for the last couple of years, so they've kind of used the tight liquidity to target the exchange rate to some degree. Now, again, whilst I have sympathy for what they're trying to achieve, I think you have to be very cautious about that as a long-term strategy. So fortunately in Jamaica's case, unlike in the past, which Charles is very familiar with, we're not running we kind of got current account balance, which means that, with including remittances, mind you, but still. So that means we're spending as much as we earn. So we're not, in 2008, we had a current account deficit of 20% of GDP. So we had everything going wrong, literally, literal disaster, right? It was an extraordinarily tough situation. And, at some point, I think the IDB is going to rise it up properly, right? Right, Henry? Anyway, so basically, I would think, although it may not be immediate, because I think they're going to have to reduce interest rates for, somewhat significantly for that to happen. But at some point, I would expect the financial stocks, which are the predominant, the most of the market, at some point I would expect them to recover from, because they haven't really recovered from COVID. Right. And that, and of course, some of the manufacturing companies, which are reasonable. There's a few that are a little cheap, but there's no outstanding bargains in the local stock market. So I'm not sort of banging, twice in my life I've banged the table and said, the stock market is going to double. And twice in my life I got it right, fortunately. One time my father was in the audience, so I was very happy about that. But I'm not saying that at this moment in time because we're not got a super cheap market. In the US, there's some people who think that, and I'll stay with stocks because I'll leave you guys with the bonds because you're the bond gurus. Whilst I think the US has a soft landing scenario, which is positive, they also have pretty high stock prices. So you have to remember that, and you also have to remember that a lot of this is AI generated, so it kind of looks a little bit bubblish. Now, not to say that AI will not have a dramatic impact longer term, but they've kind of, in many cases, they look like they've anticipated that longer term already. So it kind of reminds me a little bit, it's not entirely reminiscent because there are differences, but it reminds me a little bit of 2000 in the US. So you have to be a little careful, but a positive interest rate cuts and an economy that doesn't fall off a cliff should nevertheless be reasonably positive for the US stock market. So you still probably got I wouldn't expect super returns in either, but you should see probably on a sort of medium-term outlook something positive, and it may actually produce more than than bonds, which is what it's supposed to do. It may. I'm not saying it will. It may, because in both cases, the Jamaica stock market is a little depressed still, and I don't necessarily expect, an instant turnaround. And on the U.S. side, it's already had a pretty good run, so it's not cheap. So I'll leave, as I said, I'll leave the bond stuff to you guys because you spend more time on it than me.
I like that summary, Keith. Thank you. Local stock market, U.S. stock market, expensive, but could deliver positive returns in the medium term. Charles, what's your one asset class pick?
Well, you shouldn't have to ask. Bonds certainly will do well. It's sort of axiomatic that if yields fall, prices go up. The real challenge will be, picking the best opportunities that are out there in terms of credit quality. But certainly now's the time, I think, to go longer dated and look for some price appreciation in the year or two to come.
And Henry, what about you?
Sure. I mean, again, I'm not in the business of professional investing. So with that caveat, I mean, I also agree. I am also always surprised at when I look at things like the PE ratio for the U.S. S&P 500, and it's near 30 right now. And it has remained in that range. It's done extremely well very recently, including in the last week. But the markets have remained pretty frothy throughout the last couple of years, even with very high interest rates. You would expect them to do even better with lower rates, but I'm not sure where they can go from here, with the exception of some obviously places AI linked stories, which are also very, the valuations are quite high, but at least there's some prospect of acceleration there. In terms of fixed income, obviously longer duration assets are looking good right now. But again, and we still have an inverted yield curve, right? So there are lots of spots on the curve that you could pick that might be attractive with depending rate reductions. But again, I think the rates are not everything, right? I mean, the longer term story is extremely important, and I think we are all sort of consensus that we're going to have the Goldilocks scenario, soft landing, but there's a lot of risks still out there. And I think, there is uncertainty, and that's really what needs to drive investment decisions in the long run. And also the other thing that I mentioned, which, where do we end up, right? What is neutral now? Where do the Fed funds rate and where do interest rates end up, even in relatively normal context in terms of macro performance? And I think, we're certainly not going to get back down to zero unless there's some kind of global catastrophe again, which may well happen. And we've seen 2 of them in the last decade or so. But yeah, I think it's a challenging environment, but I think things are looking good in relative terms to what we thought might happen a year ago. But I think it's still worthwhile being somewhat cautious about what we expect to happen in the next 3 to 6 months, because I think there are a lot of key issues that still have to play themselves out.
Thanks, Henry. All right, so I'm going to open it up to the floor for Q&A from the audience. I believe we have a roving microphone. And if you would just raise your hand. Okay, great, thank you. And state your name and question, please.
Good evening. I'm Lucy Eanes. And with regards to what Mr. Collister said about the Bank of Jamaica having a real difficult time making decisions, I can appreciate that, because while I understand that it is good to have lower interest rates, which will be great for investors, how will that affect the Jamaican dollar to the US dollar? What will happen then?
She said Jamaican dollar?
Mrs. Eames, you mean
interest rates? The interest, the U.S. rates.
the exchange rate?
The exchange rate.
Right, right.
Okay,
Okay,
how will lower rate?
Yeah, I'm glad somebody asked that because it's the obvious one. I think less than you would think is the answer. And the reason is because what the market here, it seems, well, first of all, we got an unusually large amount of foreign exchange reserves. It's not where we haven't been in, we've never been actually in this position. And secondly, the current account, as I said earlier, which is what we spend versus what we earn, is actually in rough balance, which is, again, a situation which we haven't necessarily been in the past. In fact, most of the time we haven't been in that. It's very rare for us to have been in that situation. Now, it is true that the Bank of Jamaica has been part of the reason, I believe, that they have tightened the, in particular, they tightened liquidity, is, partly to influence the price of the Jamaican dollar. In what they seem to be doing, and again, I think there's, I have sympathy to what they're trying to achieve, is they seem to be saying, all right, we will have a band in which the dollar will trade. I think the band is probably 3 or 4% a year. It is reasonable. It'll cycle a bit in that band. And what they're trying to do is, to the degree that they're trying to smooth the volatility of the dollar, and the people talk about what is the right level, how much should you allow the dollar to move? And people get very uncomfortable in Jamaica very quickly when the dollar moves. But if you actually look at it over the last few years, on a net basis at the end, if you looked at it at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, it really hasn't depreciated very much. Sometimes it goes up a few points more, which I think it's been doing that recently. And that's because there's not a shortage of dollars, as there in the past. The BOJ has sufficient dollars available and they have been intervening over the last few days to smooth it out. The government is not, So my basic point is the interest rate itself between, say, the U.S. Fed and Jamaica is not as important into determining what happens to the dollar as it used to be. And also, we dropped interest rates, some people will remember, before the crisis, we dropped them to 0.5%, and the Fed was at 0.25%. And we weren't doing all the quantitative easing and putting the liquidity into the system in the same way the Fed was doing at that time. So, yet we managed to have the same relative stability in that period without, the dollar collapsing or anything. So I think we're in a new period of relative macro stability, which obviously we want to retain. We're balancing the budget. That's another thing. We're still running a balanced budget, which was not true for literally decades. And worse when you consider all the off-budget stuff that you then had to add on the extra debt that would come on every year. So we have had an unusual period of macro stability, which up to this point continues. And if you have macro stability, then you have to worry less about things like, all right, is the interest rate 1/4 point or 1/2 point, or is it moves at 1 or 2%, because people have a relative degree of confidence. Now, we do want to know who the next finance minister is. I asked Charles, but he claimed he didn't know. And I don't know, just in case anybody was wondering. So there is that. But I would say that I don't think that we should be as concerned as in the past that, cuts in interest rates or even, they've already relaxed the tightening of liquidity. It's actually happened already. So the only thing they haven't done is the formal signal cut of an interest rate. I would argue probably the liquidity loosening is at least as important to the dollar, if not more important, than whether they drop interest rates. Why it's important for them to drop interest rates is that interest rates act as the policy rate acts as a reference rate for all the bank lending. So I'm saying that the bank interest rates are now too high for the state of the economy, and therefore we need lower interest rates, and we need that to transmit through the system relatively quickly. Otherwise, we will have, a pretty stagnation will be the best case scenario, and we could have, multiple periods of negative GDP, which would actually be a recession, defined as negative quarters of. So that would be an actual recession. So that's why I'm suggesting that now is the time to cut rates, and frankly, we're already a little late.
Yes. That was a good question, Mrs. Eanes. Charles, did you want to add anything to that before I take the next question? No? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for the comprehensive answer, Keith. Any other questions?
And thank you for that, because I wanted to get to the exchange rate.
Yeah. Well, if no one else has any questions, I suppose I'll just sneak a final one in there. And it relates to something. Oh, no, we do have one more question. Oh, yes, sorry.
Hello, good evening. I'm David Weir. The question that I have is really for, I would say, the person who can predict the elections that is actually coming up. That is a critical thing. We know that we have two totally diverse views as to how they think they're going to lead the country of the United States. I just want to find out your thoughts on the best case scenario of a Donald Trump winning and how that would affect pretty much just really given his thoughts on macroeconomics and how he will just concentrate only on America, how is that going to affect us on a global scale also?
Thank you. I think we'll rely on Henry's crystal ball.
Henry, you want to answer that?
As the U.S. citizen on the panel.
He says no. He's in Washington, Henry's in
Well, what I
Washington.
would say no to is I am not a U.S. citizen. I am a Canadian and Brazilian citizen. So
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Apology accepted. Though my wife and 4 children are American citizens, so I guess I'm implicated. Look, I can say a few things, and I think I actually mentioned it before, so I'll get back to that. It's not a value judgment. I can't vote in the United States. So I have no official opinion on what an ideal outcome would be. But I do think that, and I mentioned it before, that depending on the outcome, you could have a very different path for fiscal policy going forward in the United States. And possibly, and certainly because of that, the interest rate path, right? So back to sort of the Fed rates. You can look this up yourself, and I don't pretend to be an expert, but one party is promising pretty significant tax cuts and tariffs and other policies. Certainly, the tax cuts could be seen as a precursor to a more inflationary environment in the future. So you can think through the implications of one policy platform versus the other, which might be more traditional in terms of what the policy dynamics look like, and are actually talking about tax increases, certainly for some of the higher income Americans. So I think that there is something to consider there as it relates to your outlook for U.S. economic performance, inflation, and interest rates. And I think at least if the current candidates stick to what they are talking about in public in terms of economic platforms, and one never knows if that will happen, But I think you could see two very different dynamics in terms of certainly revenue.
It's about the U.S. stock market, although interestingly, anyway, I mean, if we think it through, you probably will have higher tariffs, higher inflation, tax cuts, which could potentially offset some of the impact of the higher tariffs, and also you could also have a less independent Fed, which is what is being talked about. In other words, as a goose the economy, kind of put pressure to, let's call it pressure anyway, to goose the economy a bit, to offset these other things. So perhaps a higher inflation outcome. On the other hand, you may have, it's likely that probably if the other party wins, it's likely that you may not have the tariffs, or at least certainly not what is talked about, but you may have a slightly tighter fiscal policy because the tax cuts don't get renewed, for example. Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about there's a tax cuts that were put in place which are expiring next year. So if you don't keep, taxes go back up if you don't do anything, and presumably that the idea is that cuts the fiscal deficit somewhat. I mean, it needs to be cut, frankly, because 6% is high. So that are the choices, and that could have different impacts on both the U.S. stock market and the U.S. bond market. It would have quite different impacts. But there's a lot of uncertainty, so trying to forecast that is first of all, it's a coin toss, or it looks like a coin toss, and then you don't know what will actually happen. People announce stuff, often it doesn't happen, and if you don't have Congress, you don't have the ability to do it anyway. So I would say that the different scenario. Thanks for the question, because what it means, it allows one to note that there are different outcomes, significantly different outcomes that we need to consider.
That's an important point. Thank you. I think we have time for one last question, and we'll be around for. Maybe we can squeeze in one more. Yes, sure. Yeah. Oh, Michelle, in the middle. You can come after.
Good night, everyone. The name is Floretta Plomo. This might be an easier question. We have had macro stability for quite a while in Jamaica. Could you look in your crystal ball? If there's a change of government, what do you think will happen? Will they be able to maintain that stability?
Excellent question. Bringing it close to
Boy,
home.
these people are good.
I know, they're really hard questions.
You have a good audience here.
I should have just asked them for the panel questions.
They asked the right questions. Okay. I'll be very bold and take that one. I feel like you felt the last question, Henry. Look, my view is that the PNP were there in the toughest portion of the IMF program. That was so yes, the shift, there was an attempted shift in the JLP's term, 2007 to 2010. But if you actually looked at the level of the situation, it was extraordinary. Now, and there's an argument they should have made a bigger debt. They should have done more on the debt side at the time. There's a number of arguments that can play. What anyone can't deny is that, in 2013, Dr. Peter Phillips, working closely with a guy called Mark Golding, did a very tough fiscal adjustment at that time. Now, the good news is that, if you like, the heavy lift, the really heavy lifting, that was really, really tough. Now, what you've had since then is a continuation of this policy right up to the current date. And now, debt to GDP is half what it was. So that's, and you've had a balanced budget right through, except for once during COVID, which is an extraordinary by our current account, in balance. You've had a number of important reforms, fiscal commission, which is supposed to start next year. EPOC still continues to date. I actually think that they should incorporate the EPOC into a social partnership and have us holding government to account to stop just something of what you talked of. What you're implying is to, we don't want people to go wild in a new administration. So I think it imposes a duty on civil society and the people here today and everybody to say, we want our macro stability, we want to retain that. I do not think that a new government would say, right, out with the macro stability that we've had we've paid such a high price to retain. Now, it may be that they want to spend a little bit more money. That would not surprise me. But the truth is, the situation now is a little different than it was in 2013, where we were literally in dire straits. And really, we've been in dire straits for a very long time in Jamaica. It's not a new thing, right? It's just, we've had high levels of debt. Now we don't. So, or at least it's manageable now. So I would expect that there'd be pressure by civil society, by the media, by everybody to say, look, we're not going to go back to the situation where we start to, pay 20%. I think we were as high as 18 or 20% of GDP in interest costs. It's ridiculous. Now we're down to like 6 or 5.5. So, a third or a quarter, depending on which time you use. So we're in a very different situation than we were. I don't expect a dramatic change, but there may certainly be different emphases, and I think it also behoves everybody to say, all right, you've got a fiscal commission. Do we want some form of EPOC, social partnership, incorporated social partnership? Mechanisms to try to make sure that no new government feels that they're going to just, blow the budget and go back to where we've been in so many times in the past. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, I think that was a great answer, Keith. Thank you. I know Charles is happy he dodged the question, so I'll go to this final question from the audience. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Mikhail Thompson. We've heard of low levels of unemployment and a relative labor shortage. What effect do you think that will have on increasing inflation locally and affecting the BOJ's ability to reduce interest rates to fight inflation? Basically, the effect of lower labor on increasing wages and inflation and how we
I can
address
go with that. Okay, maybe Charles wants to go after.
Charles? Yeah.
Charles? I mean, okay, for the first time in my memory in Jamaica, and I'm older than I look, you've had labor shortage across sectors coming out of the COVID crisis. So 4%, whether it's 4 or 5%, they just reclassified the unemployment rate slightly. But, we've never had as low level of unemployment rate as we have now. Now, on the other hand, I think if you could say the problem has solved itself a bit because the economy is already flatlining. As I said to you, the people are talking about layoffs in the tourism sector. The construction sector is not. So that period, which really was last year probably, where there was a shortage of, everybody was complaining about a shortage of labor. I'm not hearing that so strongly anymore now. So it's not that the labor situation is, unemployment has gone up really. It's just that, I don't hear everybody screaming, okay, I can't find workers as they were towards the end of last year, which was, of course, when we were still recovering from our situation. So we're kind of now just going into what a sort of stalling thing. So I think that problem, if you could say, has already solved itself. What I'm hoping we avoid here is a situation we may have seen in the past where the economy really starts to go down, and this is why I'm hoping the Bank of Jamaica cuts interest rates. I keep saying that, right? Right, Henry? I know you're a former central banker. So I'm hoping that we avoid the situation where we see significant layoffs like sometimes we've seen in the past in certain industries. And probably we will. And I don't think the economy is going to fall off a cliff. It's just that because normally that happens because of some macro instability of which we've had a lot of. So normally there's a big macro reason why our economy falls off a cliff in Jamaica. That's been our historic situation. Otherwise, we kind of flatline more. We're more of a flatline place. We just, continue on in the flatline. So what I would say is that I'm not overly concerned about a labor shortage if the Bank of Jamaica cuts interest rates at this time, because we're already got a decelerating economy, and I think we're just trying to avoid it actually going negative. It's almost kind of like the US, except we're not as well positioned as them. The US, they're trying to get ahead of an economic decline, further rise in unemployment. So for once, actually, because normally they're behind the curve, right? And what I'm saying is we're a little bit behind the curve, but it's salvageable, and we're kind of, because we're always flatlining anyway. So you like that, I see. So I'm not overly concerned about your concern. Hopefully that answers it. You sure you don't want to attempt to this one, Charles?
Doesn't believe wages contribute to inflation. He says it's money supply.
Go and have a go, Charles.
Can I trigger a response with that?
No, I wouldn't, worry about wages pushing up inflation at the moment. And I think Keith answered the question very well, that, we're probably not in a situation now where there's a huge excess demand for labor, which may not be a good thing, but that's the reality of where we are.
You've been listening to the Sterling Investor Briefing here at the AC Hotel in St. Andrew. We're going to go for a short break, and when we come back from the break, we'll have with us Dwayne Neal, the Assistant Vice President for Personal Financial Planning Investment, and he'll talk to us about investment opportunities.
Does your bra ride up your back? Do your shoulders hurt from carrying the weight of your breasts? These are signs of an ill-fitting bra. When was the last time you were fitted by a bra fit specialist? The bra experts at LaBelle Femme will take care of you. Drop into the store at 53 Lady Musgrave Road, Tuesdays to Saturdays from 10 to 5, and you will see the difference. Or call 876-622-6091.
Freedom, speed, agility, intelligence, friendship. These are the hallmarks that define the dolphin, the master of the seas, and are the hallmarks that inspire Sterling Asset Management. For over 20 years, we have provided investment products that give our clients financial freedom, and our service is fast, insightful, warm, and genuine. Sterling Asset Management, intelligent investing for the intelligent investor.
Attention motorists, it's time to switch to the T-Tag on Highway 2000 East-West. Automated T-Tag lanes reduce the cost of collecting and managing cash at our toll plazas, and drivers of Class 1 and Class 2 vehicles who use the T-Tag pay a lower toll fare than those who use the manually operated toll booths. These motorists also get their 10th trip through any one toll plaza free. The T-Tag makes it quicker, more cost-efficient, and safer for our customers. So switch to the T-Tag today and experience the convenience.
When I grow up, I'm going to be a famous gamer with viral videos all over the internet. I'm going to be rich. Good thing I'll already know how to take care of my money since Mommy got me this Sure Start account.
Open a CIBC Caribbean Sure Start account for your kids and give them a head start on financial smarts with a $1,200 sign-up bonus from us. We believe in their dreams as much as you do, so let's get them going together. Start young, start strong with Sure Start from CIBC.
Here's to the early risers, and we are here all-nighters. The go the extra milers, and let's do it until it works, workers. People who are powerful because they power through day after day, challenge after challenge. You see, true power, it's not something you can buy or collect. It is something that starts on the inside, and you always know it when you see it. Sunshine Snack Peanuts. Proud supporters of the powerful.
Freedom, speed, agility, intelligence, friendship. These are the hallmarks that define the dolphin, the master of the seas, and are the hallmarks that inspire Sterling Asset Management. For over 20 years, we have provided investment products that give our clients financial freedom, and our service is fast, insightful, warm, and genuine. Sterling Asset Management, intelligent investing for the intelligent investor.
Thank you so much for staying with us here on Nationwide at 5. I'm Ricardo Brooks, and we're coming to you live from the AC Hotel in St. Andrew. We've been bringing you the Sterling Investor Briefing. Now, I have with me Dwayne Neal, who is the Assistant Vice President of Personal Financial Planning. Good evening, Dwayne.
Good evening, Ricardo.
How are you?
I'm good. You?
I'm doing all right. So, first of all, talk to our listeners a little bit about the importance of financial planning as a general matter.
Well, as a general matter, we know that, yes, we're able to live day to day. You earn an income periodically, but you also have to realize that down the line, there could be incidents that require more than you currently earn, or there may become a point where you no longer have that earning. So investing is important to create that lump sum or that nest egg, if you will, that will allow you to go through those times when there is no income or there is extra need.
And are you finding that Jamaicans are warming to the idea of sound financial planning and its importance?
Yes, I don't think it's something recent, but we have now become more understanding, more knowledgeable of the options available to us. So you find that the investors are, because of that added knowledge, they're now looking at other avenues and ways to invest to maximize their earnings.
And what are some of the, let's call them, options available for investment?
Well, at Sterling, we primarily focus on US dollar fixed income products. So persons looking to earn income from US dollars, that is our primary focus. So we look at global bonds for persons looking to grow their wealth, grow their portfolio, and not necessarily looking for income. We offer a mutual fund which allows for more rapid growth. You have a fund manager manage those funds. Currently, year to date, that fund is doing roughly 12%. On an average basis, since inception, the average return is 10.6% on US dollars. So those are some of the products that we offer that allow for growth and or income, depending on what the investor needs.
And listeners, if you're hearing increased chatter and activity, that's because the briefing has just wrapped, and the audience, they've come out into the lobby area to chit-chat and to refresh themselves. Dwayne Neal, in terms of the steps, so my listeners tuned in now, have been tuned into this briefing, and they hear you talking about those opportunities. In terms of the steps that they need to take now to take advantage of what Sterling has to offer, what do they need to do?
Okay, well, the first thing would be to contact us at Sterling, reach out to one of our investment advisors, have the discussion, determine what it is that you need. We look at your needs, we look at your risk appetite. We then look at what steps would get you to your goal. So once we have an idea, we can lay out a plan, lay out a map, and we can take it from there. We'll guide you as to what's the best options out there for you.
Mm-hmm. So these kind of plans are personalized to the circumstance of the person seeking to invest?
Yes, because each of us we have different needs, we have different goals and objectives. So depending, which is why I say reach out to us, make that call so we can have a one-on-one sit down and present something to you. I may present you something and it's not exactly in line with what you have in your thoughts, and we'll tweak it from there. So I'll give you a first draft, we'll back and forth, we'll go back, we'll tweak it until we get something that's perfect for you.
Mm-hmm. And what's the message you'd want to leave with our audience this evening in terms of what Sterling offers and what sets you apart from the others in the market?
Okay, well, at Sterling, we thrive on relationships. So we have that one-on-one. Like I said, if you call, you speak to a person, you never get recorded, you never get automated answering machine. So it's always a person. Reach out, have that conversation, see where you are now, lay out where you want to be, and build that plan. And we'll do that with you one-on-one. So...
yeah. All right. And everybody likes that kind of particularized approach, and everybody likes to feel special. So
yes.
that's good. So we call that the Sterling way. Dwayne Neal is the Assistant Vice President of Personal Financial Planning. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Have a good one. We're going to take a quick break. Yeah, and then we come back from the break. We have Mr. Keith Collister. He's the Executive Chairman of the ATL Pension Fund. Soon come.
Azen Super Center in Midtown Crossroads, a place you've come to know and trust for quality and the best prices. Now, come see our expanded range of products, fine furnishings, kitchenware, your smart TVs, and all things electronics, and the latest in curtains, bed linen, and bathroom accessories. It's the new and expanded Azen Super Center in Midtown Crossroads with convenient, safe, and free parking. Shop with a smile at Azen Super Center.
Drive Hyundai vehicles beyond your dreams with an exclusive 4.99% interest rate. Yes! Shop Hyundai vehicles and get a super low 4.99% interest rate on your car loan. Plus 2 years free service, 1 year insurance, and 5 years warranty. Offer valid on all 2024 Hyundai vehicles. Drive your Hyundai with the lowest interest, 4.99%. Conditions apply.
My Mega best value by far. With so much to do in one location, make Megamart your one-stop shop. Pick up your groceries and houseware needs, grab a bite and pay some bills, fill your prescriptions and see the beauty products in our pharmacy. All in one amazing location. My Megamart, the best value by far.
Freedom, speed, agility, intelligence, friendship. These are the hallmarks that define the dolphin, the master of the seas, and are the hallmarks that inspire Sterling Asset Management. For over 20 years, we have provided investment products that give our clients financial freedom, and our service is fast, insightful, warm, and genuine. Sterling Asset Management, intelligent investing for the intelligent investor.
We're now on the final stretch of this broadcast from the AC Hotel in St. Andrew. We've been bringing you the Sterling Investor Briefing, The briefing has wrapped, and those who attended are on the outside now in the lobby area, refreshing themselves, doing a lot of networking and chit-chatting. I have with me, though, of course, you know I'm Ricardo Brooks, and I have with me Keith Collister. He's the executive chairman of the ATL Pension Fund and chair of the Economic Affairs and Taxation Committee of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce. And, of course, he's a Jamaica Observer columnist, yeah? So let me ask, first of all, Mr. Collister, welcome, by the way.
Hi,
Welcome
Ricardo.
to
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Welcome to Nationwide at 5 again.
Yes, I haven't been on your program for a while.
All right, welcome. So let me ask you, the state of the pension industry in Jamaica, how do you assess it?
Well, you've had a challenging last few years, basically since COVID. And, you know, the asset markets here haven't been that great. It's not unique to Jamaica, but it's, you know, it's been a sort of period, I would say, of really recovery. So you've had, you know, the stock. You're still waiting for the stock market to recover, which of course is a significant portion of the shares, and of course those who had bought bonds, which went in, you know, at the prices when interest rates were relatively low, and then they went up. They would, as Charles had said, you know, they wouldn't have done so well. But you know, now you've had a period when interest rates have been higher, so you've had some people who've got cash. They started to do better on that portion. You know, real estate, you know, it's always has been historically a good investment here, and it's more stable. So I would say, state of the pension industry, I think it's in a recovering mode still, relative to where it was, say, in the 2015 to 2019 period, when you had buoyant asset markets here, and we're basically coming out of the the crisis of the first half of the 2010s.
Mm-hmm. And that makes me think about sustainability, especially long-term sustainability. Is there anything in particular you'd want to see from policymakers that would ensure or secure that sustainability?
Well, I'd love to see them really encourage much greater participation in the pension industry. There's different, there's the number of people who actually have a pension is still way, way lower than it. I mean, it's poor. It's way, way lower than it should be. So,
and do you think, let me just ask, do you think that's a result of just lack of knowledge, or what do you think is the cause of that?
Well, part of it is, there is a knowledge element to it.
Yeah.
So education is part of it, and it's education for everybody, including, the employees. But it's not just them. There's a need for education on pension. The society is aging. I just was, I think, on a radio TV program recently about the recent study about the people, the demographic change that's occurring in Jamaica. So we need to recognize that and adapt, and obviously proper pension provision is one of those ways of adapting. But I also think that more can be done in terms of policy. We've been talking about a phase 2 of the Pension Act for as long as I can remember. I literally can't remember how long we've been talking about this happening. And every year for a number of years, they said, next year it's going to be the year where we're going to do a new round of pension legislation. And every year looks like it's next year.
Yeah.
And as I said, I literally don't remember how long that's been going on for, but I can assure you it's been going on for a very long time. I think the last Pension Act may have been 2006. So we're still waiting for that. I might be wrong. My memory might have failed me. But so yeah, sure. We need to aggressively, and we need to see, are there different micro pensions? Are there ways of the government saying, all right, can we do something not just with the tourism industry, which I welcome,
Yeah.
the tourism pension,
Pensions, right.
but other industries. Maybe they do it a little differently, but provide that some of those incentives that they provided, not just for tourism. There's quite a few different areas in which they could really get more aggressive about encouraging, much greater participation by members in pension. Make it more flexible, make it people be able to move around more. There's all kinds of, but it does require focus, and it does require somebody to say that I'm going to take this on. And the biggest problem we have in Jamaica, one of the biggest problems, is it's very difficult to change legislation here. You literally wait for decades for legislation to change,
Right.
and we need to. Now that we're paying the public sector more, we need to sort of. That's one of the areas where I think we need to focus on and get legislation changed quickly when it needs to be changed. Because a lot of times people agree. There's things that people don't agree on, but the stuff that everybody agrees on,
We should
both
move on
political
those
parties,
things.
we should move on.
Yeah.
And pension, I'm sure, is
is
one of those.
An area of agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Finally, those who are listening, it perhaps goes without saying, and we would hope that most people would acknowledge how necessary some kind of pension plan is. But I want you to just talk a little bit more about that. Why it's so important to have a pension.
Well, pension is saving for retirement. Most people, we don't have generous. Even those who actually are formally in NIS, they're nothing like Barbados, or much less even UK or the United States. So we need to save for our retirement, and we need to save more. And I think the government should be more generous in the tax. They are generous, but I'm saying we should do everything we can to say it's really worth saving. And savings, by the way, is good for the economy anyway, because you want to have long-term savings to finance things like infrastructure investment.
Right.
That's what we should be saying. All right, pension, let's encourage pension. Oh, and by the way, let's invest more in our own infrastructure and have a nice, stable, good long-term investment yield. So marry the two, because we know we have an infrastructure deficit in Jamaica. And we know that we need to have assets for, pensioners to retire on. So I just think that we need a much more aggressive approach on this issue, and to drive the economy and really help with infrastructure, but also make sure that people can retire properly. And of course now you've got the need for resilience with climate change and all the rest of it. So it's even more important now than it was before to start investing long term in infrastructure. And the question is, how do you finance that? Well, we need to have more savings. Hopefully, maybe I can get some of these global experts down here, and we can have a proper conversation. I'll call nationwide when that happens.
We'd be more than willing to participate, and hopefully the policymakers start to take this matter seriously. Keith Collister is the Executive Chairman of ATL Pension Fund and Chair of the Economic Affairs and Taxation Committee of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much, Keith Collister. Really appreciate
Ricardo.
it. Thank
Nice
you.
to see you.
Nice to see
Yeah,
you
man,
too.
it's been a while.
All right, so listeners, that's it for us here at the Sterling Investment briefing. As I told you, the briefing has wrapped, and the attendees are now mingling, doing a little bit of networking and chit-chatting, refreshing themselves. Special thanks to our producer, Sonia Stewart, our technical operator in studio, Andrew Anderson, the man on the ground here behind the controls, Jermaine Compass, our videographer, Jamal Tucker, Sheldon Richards, our branding assistant, the entire team at Sterling Asset Management. Thank you all so much, and my colleagues in the news and production team. Thank you all. I'm Ricardo Brooks. Have a good evening.
freedom, speed, agility, intelligence,